We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting of the South and West Plans panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. The South and West Plans panel deals with applications from the south, northwest, and west of the city. And the aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public, and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. I'd like to start the meeting today by confirming that this meeting of the South and West Plans panel meets the requirements of the Council's constitution, even though members of the panel are in remote attendance. Whilst items today will be fully discussed, as is usual, remote attendance requires a few slight changes as to how I manage the debate. Therefore, can all attendees mute their microphone unless I invite them to speak? This will avoid disruption from background noise. Can all participants please keep their cameras on during the meeting? All participants will be invited to introduce themselves at the start of the public session to make it clear to the public observers who will be involved in the proceedings. So I ask for your assistance and patience while I go through this process. In order to avoid any disruption to the meeting, should I lose internet connectivity, I propose we appoint a vice chair who could step in during my absence. And I move that Councillor Julie Heselwood and invite another member to second that motion.
Second, Chair.
Thank you. I'll take a vote by assuming silence as approval, and I'll just wait 5 seconds for that. Is there anybody wishing to be an abstention? No, thank you. So can I now invite members, please, to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you've done so. Could I start with Councillor Barry Anderson, please?
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Councillor Brooks.
Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Councillor Campbell, have you joined us yet?
Yes, I've been here some time, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Colin Campbell, out at Ockley. Hopefully
Thank you.
this will be the last remote meeting we have, and next month we may well be able to see each other again.
We were just remarking on that. Councillor Finnegan.
I'm Robert Finnegan, the councillor for Molly North Ward.
You're a little faint, Councillor Finnegan. If you could get a little closer, perhaps, to your microphone. Councillor Heselwood.
Councillor Julie Heselwood from Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Councillor Hamilton.
Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moortown Ward.
Councillor Reagan. She's still having difficulties. Okay, Councillor Ray.
Councillor Paul Ray, Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Thank you. And now the officers. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Butler, Group Manager for South West and North West Leeds and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel.
Jonathan.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Thank you. Adam.
Yes, hello, Adam Ward, South West Team Leader.
Thank you. Mark.
Good afternoon, Mark Jackson, Principal Planning Officer.
Nigel. You're either on mute or you're not here, Nigel. Is he here, Andy?
Yeah, Nigel's on the call at the moment.
He has got it muted at the minute, though.
We'll come back to you, Nigel, now that we know you're here.
Sorry, Chair. I was,
I
managed to gain a connection. Nigel Wren, Planning Services.
Thank you, Nigel. Catherine.
Catherine Chimoli, Highways.
Thank you. Nicole.
Nicole is not available for this meeting. I'll be taking over for the South and West. It's Nikki Diol. I'm legal advisor to this panel today, Chair, and in the event that I lose connection, Miss Plumtree Varley is available to advise.
Thank you, Nikki. Lewis.
Good afternoon. I'm Lewis Footer. I'll be in charge of the panel PowerPoint today. In the event I lose connection, we have Louis Ellsworth as my backup.
Thank you very much indeed. And so now moving to the agenda. Andy, can you handle the first few items for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press and public. Under agenda item number 3, We're not aware of any late items of business today. Under agenda item number 4, can I ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare?
I don't see any.
No. And under agenda item number 5, we've not received any apologies for absence today.
Thank you very much. Therefore, moving to item 6, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 1st of April. I am assuming that people will have read these minutes. Can I therefore ask for page by page whether anyone would like to raise anything? Page 7 of your pack, which is the first page of the minutes. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. And the final page, page 11. Okay, so there are no matters arising so far as I can see. On to agenda item 7 then, please, the golf club application, Thorpe Lane, Tingling. Could I invite the presentation to start, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. This application that I'm presenting to members is an application that seeks permission to redevelop a parcel of land that's currently used as a golf course stroke driving range with a garden centre and children's adventure play centre stroke external spaces. To note, the site has been granted consent in 2016 for a garden centre. However, the consent only related to a small proportion of the overall site, and the golf course was not incorporated within the proposed redevelopment. The applicant of this proposal is different to that of 2016 consent, and this proposal looks to use a business model that is more viable, proven to be successful locally, and is a comprehensive £14 million redevelopment of the entire site. The proposal, as I shall explain further, is for a comprehensive redevelopment of the site that is currently unsightly and unkempt. There's various lorry trailer hoardings, amongst other things, that blight the landscape and disassociate the land from the wider green belt within which it sits. Although this proposal is for development within the green belt, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable and will bring significant social, economic and environmental improvements that are considered to represent very special circumstances that allow for development such as this to take place in the Greenbelt. To update members, since the Plans Panel agenda was published, one further representation has been received in connection with the proposal. The concerns raised in the representation, though, have been covered by the Chief Planning Officer's recommendation, and no further material planning considerations have therefore been raised. So going on to the site, if I could have the next slide, please, Lewis. The application relates to a former agricultural and quarrying land that has previously, as I've just mentioned, been redeveloped to form a golf course, and there is currently driving range nets amongst other things on the site, along with a golf clubhouse. The site has been reworked and re-landscaped at various points in the past, and it's currently in an unkempt and unattractive state. Amongst the small buildings and structures, as I've previously said, other forms of structures such as lorry trailers that situated on banks that are visible from various points around the site. The site is almost triangular in its shape, and it's bounded by Thorpe Lane to the west, the M62 to the south, and there's the Wakefield Leeds railway line, which is also sited towards the northeast. Although the site is greenbelt, and its wider area broadly appears to be that of a wider urban fringe of Leeds, the very edge of Middleton lies beyond the boundary, and Tingling and East and West Ardsley are located to the south beyond the M62. In the immediate vicinity of the site, there are a number of long-established businesses, including a small garden centre stroke nursery on the other side of Thorpe Lane. There's scrapyard, breakers yards, and various other commercial uses in the immediate vicinity. The surrounding area is largely level, although within the site, as I've previously mentioned, there have been significant reworkings of the landscape. The golf clubhouse that's currently on the site sits towards the southwestern section of the site, and a large car park is to the western frontage of that. The current golf course and driving range uses have ceased. The uses are currently accessed from 2 access points on off Thorpe Lane. If I could have the slide with the proposed site plan, please. The site has been the subject of variety of planning applications, and a garden centre was approved as well as in 2016, also in 1987. That proposal was implemented with the construction of part of the access, and therefore that permission, the 1980s permission, is an extant consent that could be built out. This proposal, it seeks to demolish various existing structures and will comprise of a garden centre with internal and external sales areas, internal and outdoor children's adventure play areas, regrading extensive landscaping of the site, facilitating the provision of external adventure play space, car parking spaces for 612 vehicles set to the west of the garden centre, and broadly speaking on the area that's currently used for car parking. The retention of the existing golf clubhouse, which is to then facilitate ancillary services, office spaces, as well as the access to the external children's play, adventure play area. The building itself, along with the other parts of the development, will include various measures to ensure that it is as sustainable as possible, and aims to meet the goals that our climate emergency as outlined. So it will include things like solar panels, various, the fabric of the building will be of a high quality. So with regards to energy consumption and performance, it is considered to improve significantly upon the past consents that have been granted. Furthermore, across the site, there will also be biodiversity improvements to ensure that it has a neutral impact on biodiversity across the site. The proposed building is approximately 100 metres by 77 metres and is rectangular in shape, and will be set at an angle to the M62 motorway. The surrounding boundaries of the site to be regraded and landscaped significantly minimise the visual impact of the proposal. It's proposed to use cladding systems such as timber and metals, and the overall appearance is considered to be of a high quality. The proposal provides sufficient car parking and safe access to Thorpe Lane. The improvements to the junction entering the site will be beneficial to the wider area and will utilise one access point rather than the current 2 entrances. The uses are considered to be acceptable in highways terms. Of the nature of the uses, it's considered that the traffic generated will not be at peak times and is mostly going to be traffic over the weekend periods. In terms of the principle of the development, I need to go through, there's a couple of elements that need to be considered carefully. The site is within the green belt, and although previous consents have been given, and one permission has partially been implemented, the development has to be viewed in the current context of the National Planning Policy Framework and the local Greenbelt policies. In the NPPF, paragraph 143 states that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. It then goes on to state that very special circumstances for inappropriate development in the Greenbelt will not exist unless the potential harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. So as far as this application is concerned, the development in its entirety is not listed within the exceptions of the NPPF and therefore has to be considered inappropriate unless there are very special circumstances. In this particular case, as it's previously been mentioned, there are significant benefits both to social, economic and environmental improvements to what is at the moment an unsightly and unkempt parcel of land. The very special circumstances are considered, if I can summarise them, as facilitating economic growth in the area, a £14 million investment with up to 250 jobs to be created across all sectors, from the construction all the way through to the operation of the garden centre and children's play facilities. There'll be social benefits, including the re-landscaping of the site and the removal of unsightly structures, which in turn then provides this recreation space and visual improvements to the area and the site. There's also the provision of outdoor recreational uses that provide social benefits, such as improvements to health and well-being, and these are made viable by the garden centre and the mixed use of the garden centre and the children's outdoor and indoor play facilities. And as previously mentioned, the reworking of the land does also improve or provide biodiversity neutral impact. So overall, it's considered that very special circumstances do exist to warrant an approval, although there would be a small harm in terms of development within the Greenbelt. In terms of the retail impact, consideration has to be given to the fact that the retail and leisure elements are main town centre uses as defined in the National Planning Policy Framework, and they're out of a town centre location, so they require an assessment to be established whether sequentially the site's preferable, and if so, what, if any, impact is going to occur to the local town centres. This proposal will sell a variety of goods, such as hardy and seasonal plants, shrubs, household plants, garden furniture, seeds, bulbs, tools, watering cans, etc. But there will also be small other sales, such as outdoor clothing, books, cards, those elements that are commonly found in garden centres. The range of goods, though, is very similar to those that were proposed in the 2016 application that members might recall. The difference between this application in terms of the retail and the 2016 application is as follows. The total quantum of development in this current application is for the indoor and outdoor sales is 9,484 square metres. Compared with 2016 approval, that was it's slightly increased, because the 2016 approval was 9,022 square metres. However, that has that's for the total quantum of development. However, this proposal does remove various structures across the site, and the actual retail space is actually less than the previously approved total quantum. So in terms of just the retail space, the retail space proposed is 6,584 square metres, as opposed to 7,065 that was approved in 2016. So there is although the overall development quantum is slightly larger, the retail space is slightly less. Furthermore, conditions proposed to restrict the operations of the garden centre and will ensure an element of control over how the retail space is used and prevent for future expansion or changes within the current use class order. I think in terms of the retail development side of this, garden centres require large sites, and it is acknowledged that these are often required in rural settings. So it was sequentially looked at and tested, and no other local suitable sites in the city centre or in local town centres really exist. Furthermore, in this particular case, given the history of the site and given that we have granted approval on the site for garden centre, it's considered that in that respect as well, the proposal is acceptable sequentially. In terms of the impact on local town centres, as I've previously said, subject to conditions, the retail impact is not considered to be significant or detrimental to the extent that a refusal could be warranted. So to summarise, the proposed development is an opportunity to improve upon an unsightly and unkempt parcel of land that is currently situated in the green belt. It's of a scale that's considered to be acceptable in this location, not lead to any significant impact in terms of appearance, general amenity, or the open character of the green belt. And it's considered that the environmental, social and economic benefits of the proposal are sufficient enough to be able to consider this application and this proposal as a sustainable form of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have no speakers on this report, so I'd like to go straight into questions. We do have Mark Farnsworth on the call in case there are, to represent the applicant, in case there are any questions or information that we need from him. But first of all, can I invite questions, please, of officers? Councillor Anderson first, and then Councillor Finnegan. And I've seen you, Councillor Brooks.
A number of points for clarification. In paragraph 26, can the officer advise whether or not the local ward members do or do not support this proposal? Because I personally do put weight on the views of local residents. In terms of the carbon balance that we've got here, I accept that we're a bit early in the cycle to be able to produce a carbon balance sheet. I accept that. But when the application was approved the last time, we didn't have the climate emergency in the city. So I think we've got to take that into account. So the question is, sustainable access, presumably you're going to have to drive to here, or is there an excellent public transport system that's going to get people, or are we actually going to add to the city's problems by people needing to drive to and from it, as far as that's concerned? And in terms of the construction traffic, is there any need to level out the golf course? For example, at both Horsforth Golf Course and at Headingley Golf Course, they're having to import a lot of spoil from other sites in order to get them flat. So are they going to have to bring in from external sources spoil in order to flatten the site to make it operational? So that's the view of ward members, sustainable access and the movements of earth.
Thank you. Mark?
So local ward members for East Ardsley, for Ardsley and Robin Hood were briefed on the proposal, but no formal representations have been received in relation to the application. In the briefing, though, they raised issues of traffic and making sure that these were covered significantly in any formal planning assessment, which, as the report states, has been the case. The second point, in terms of sustainability, I think as there's the Chief Planning Officer's report states, it has to be acknowledged that this is a garden centre. There's the majority of the goods to be sold will be bulky items, and therefore require modes of transport that such as the private car. I think in terms though of comparing this to the previous application, what is brought to this proposal is it joins up, it makes a more the business approach is to make it more of a family experience. So you're not actually, the chances are these trips are going to be dual trips, and actually in terms of the trip generation compared with the previous approval, there's an element there that will actually reduce potential trips, because you would go and maybe buy something from the garden centre, but you would actually spend longer there, and you spend a day out which you might otherwise have to do separately. And so it's in that respect, it is acknowledged that there isn't a frequent public bus service. It is acknowledged that the end use does require a car travel, but on balance, it is considered that compared with the previous application, there is a degree that it is different. And as for the I think it should also be pointed out as well that compared with the 2016 approval, there are various other, since the climate emergency, as I mentioned in my presentation, there are things like it is shown that it can be biodiversity neutral across the site, which is an improvement over the previous 2016 application. Things like solar panels are being proposed, and a high quality fabric of the building to ensure that energy consumption is reduced compared with the previous approval. So overall, for the various reasons, on balance, the proposal is considered to represent a sustainable form of development. If you could, apologies, could you just remind me of the third point that you raised?
We need or otherwise to bring in earth in order to flatten the site out, because golf courses usually are undulating, and in order to make them usable, you need to flatten them out. So
in terms of the regrading and landscaping of the site, part of the proposal to minimise the visual intrusion of the development and impact upon the open character of the green belt, it is proposed to regrade the land. And as I understood, the regrading is more the shuffling around of land on site rather than bringing land in. But if Mark Farnsworth is on, he might be able to give you a definitive answer at this stage.
Mark, could you come forward and just address that point for us, please, if you're here?
Yes, I am. Yeah, there's no plans to take any material off the site. As Mark described there, it will be regrading and moving material around the site. Okay, thank you. Is that clarified that one for you, Barry?
Yeah, that's clarified them all. I might come back in again, depending on what my colleagues come up with in terms of other questions, but I'll rest for the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan then, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can you give us a breakdown on the 250 jobs? Because there seems to be some dispute as to whether it is or isn't 250 jobs. I can't see a condition obliging the developer to offer these jobs to local people like we do in other circumstances. So could you comment on both the number of jobs and why there isn't a condition to use best interests, best attempts to recruit local people? Thank you.
Do you have that information, Mark, or will you need to defer that to others?
In terms of the job creation, Mark Farnsworth again might be able to give you a better understanding of how it will work in terms of what is submitted with the application at this stage, and our understanding as outlined in the report, it's up to 250 jobs, and as I said in my presentation, that is likely to include across all different sectors from the construction phase all the way through to the operation. Mark Farnsworth again might be able to answer that point with more certainty.
Thank you. Can we ask the other Mark to come back in again, please?
Yes, thank you. As Mark alluded to, we operate a garden centre locally where we employ 220 people now. They are a mix of full and part-time roles, but at that site we don't have adventure play, which we anticipate to be quite a high employment area of this scheme. So I can't give you the exact breakdown of where they would be employed, in which areas, restaurants, retail and play, but we do envisage that we will get up to that amount of jobs, particularly as Mark said, when you factor in the construction jobs. In terms of local people, we do anticipate they will be mainly made up of local people. These are, by the nature of the role, lower paid roles, and therefore we fully envisage that they will attract and hope for local people coming forward to take these jobs.
Thank you. Is that okay with you, Robert, for the moment?
Which other garden centre does Mark run? Because that at least gives us some indication of where we are with it, or is that confidential? Mark?
No, certainly not from me. I wasn't. I didn't want to say it unless I was permitted to. We operate Tong Garden Centre, Tong Lane, Bradford.
Thank you.
Very well, thank you.
So I've got Councillor Campbell next, and then I've got Councillors Brooks and Heselwood. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask some questions to the planning officer and a highways question? I'll say the highways question till last. And I'm putting a request as well. Have you got a larger scale drawing of the proposed buildings? The copy that I've got, which was sent to us, is quite frankly so small as to be not really of much value. We talked about, in effect, the benefits of the development outweigh the loss of greenbelt. How do you quantify that, and how measurable are the benefits? You also talked about what might be sold on site. Are you thinking of conditioning what could be sold on site? I'll stick to those, and then can I ask a highways question, please?
I can see you want to come in, Steve. Did you want to respond to those issues?
Sorry, Chair. No, it was the last point that Councillor Finnegan asked about the local employment condition. I was just going to say at the end, I was going to wait until everybody else had spoken, that we can simply add that on. I think it's just been an omission.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sorry. Back to Councillor Campbell's question. Mark, are you going to start off?
Sorry. So in terms of quantifying the development in the Greenbelt, I suppose it's fair to outline what the government guidance says, that development can take both a spatial or a visual role in impacting on the openness of the Greenbelt. In terms of the spatial, as I mentioned in my presentation, the total quantum of the development is actually lower than the 2016 approval, insofar as we've got demolition of buildings, we've got the removal of things like the driving range nets, there's various structures across the site, and so overall those losses mean that in terms of what was approved previously, the development is in terms of quantum is going to have less of an impact on the openness of the greenbelt than the 2016 approval. Furthermore, in terms of the visual impact, as I mentioned about the regrading and landscaping, those will help minimise the visual intrusion of the proposal. So that's how, and that is a bit more of a judgment to be made. But in terms of what the appearance of the site is now, it is the view that this would have a much greater visual appearance than the unkept site, which is currently there's building materials that are stored near the front towards Fort Lane. There's large lorry trailers, which one of the photos, Lewis, if you could show that at all, from the M62 shows the embankment with various hoardings. Those will be removed, and that will be secured by condition to make sure they're removed. So overall, it is considered that the visual impact is not going to be any greater on the current character of the site.
Thank you very much. Can I move on now, Councillor Brooks?
Sorry.
Sorry, did you had another question, didn't you, Colin? I apologise.
Come back on that one, because I asked for quantifiable benefits, and what you really said to me there was, currently the site's a mess, this will tidy it up, and that's the benefit. But I think I was assuming you would be saying there were more benefits than simply tidying up a site. So
sorry, I mean, in terms of the quantifiable,
how are you quantifying them?
In terms of, I mean, as I explained in my presentation, I suppose you can quantify the economic benefits to the area. Like I said previously, it's a £14 million investment, and with up to 250 jobs, that is a significant economic benefit, which is classed as a very special circumstance for development in the green belt. In terms of the social and well-being, that is harder to quantify, but having recreational facilities, at the moment, the recreational facilities that are on there, the driving range and golf course, have ceased use some time ago. So they're not contributing to the area in terms of the facilities that they provide. This will provide recreational space. The biodiversity, being biodiversity neutral, and the landscaping, that is quantifiable in terms of the landscaping that will be provided. That's all visual amenity, as well as the benefits of making sure that it's biodiversity neutral. And there again, those are all considered to be very special circumstances that outweigh the small visual intrusion of the building would have.
Do you want to come back, Colin?
Can I ask my highways question?
Yes.
Back in comments. Can I ask a question about Thorpe Lane? Because this is one of those sites, like the next one, really, that would have been really nice if we could go on a site visit. The Thorpe Lane, to the best of my memory, is not exactly a substantial road. And looking at it on Google Earth, I was wondering, have highways officers done any calculations as to where, because everybody will come here by car, where they're expecting the main, I suppose, flow of traffic to be? Are they expecting it from Tingling in the south, or further up towards Middleton? And if that's the case, have they done an assessment on the effect on the local road network at the junctions at either end of Thorpe Lane?
So that's one for Catherine.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. We've looked at the transport assessment in there had trip distribution. This is both for the garden center, the play center, and the adventure area, all the trips together. And the distribution has indicated, I don't have the TA with me, but the majority of the traffic would come from the west. Yeah. And the distribution has had to be revised because it was a bit different, but it's based on the census data. And because of that, we had to do an assessment, a junction assessment for the Smitherland junction, and it operates within capacity, both with the development added to it. So the assessment that has been done has been both for this single entry and exit, which is currently now an exit, but is going to be widened with the right turn lane to enable vehicles to turn right into the site. And all the modeling indicates the junctions would operate within capacity. Now, because of the leisure use that's being proposed, when we look at congestion hotspots on the network, we look at weekday AM and PM peak. So we have considered that because the peak activity would be over the weekend, there wouldn't be significant impact on the junctions in the surrounding area. So we've only looked at Smitherland Junction and the site access, and they operate within capacity.
Chair, can I add?
Sorry, I've muted myself. My apologies. Yes, please come in.
I think it might be worth pointing to paragraph 86 of the Chief Planning Officer's report. So the applicant has provided a transport assessment and subsequently done further assessments at our request. So in terms of the junctions between the A650 Bradford Road and the A654 Thorpe Smitherland Junction was assessed, and it wasn't considered to result in any severe impact. But that is on the basis that following off-site highway works will be carried out, for which the applicant has agreed to improvements proposed right turn lane at A654, and there's proposed pedestrian crossing at A654 Thorpe Lane together with a footway along the site frontage on Thorpe Lane to link the pedestrian crossing. So yeah, the junctions have been assessed on the basis of further improvements that will be carried out as part of this development.
Thanks, Mark. Is that sufficient for now, Councillor Campbell? Okay, Councillor Heselwood next, please.
Sorry, I think Councillor Brooks was before me, sorry.
Well, I won't squabble about it, but your hand appeared in front of her, so Councillor Brooks, you are definitely next.
Okay, yeah, my question was just looking at the paragraph 23, the public response, and one of the questions is about the existing garden centre, that traffic already park on Thorpe Lane at seasonal times to go to the existing garden centre. And I know in the presentation the existing garden centre was mentioned. I just wondered if we could just go back to the plan and you could show us exactly where that is, please. Again, as Colin said, if we'd have been on a site visit, would have been able to kind of, you know, get all this in perspective. So I just wondered if we could see where that was, please.
Can you do that, Mark? Yes.
So if you are looking to the west of the site, it's directly opposite, but you can, on the plan, it just shows it's a very small it's actually a nursery, I believe, so they grow most of their plants there. It might also be worth Mark Farnsworth, he might have a better understanding of, obviously, in terms of material planning considerations, competition isn't a consideration that we can take into account or give weight to. But it might be that Mark can actually give a bit more, or shed a bit more light on how his proposal actually differs to the running and operation.
Mark, would you like to come in? Mark Farnsworth.
Yes, thank you. So Mark's quite right to point out that Springfield Nursery, they grow all their own. We don't grow any plants ourselves. We operate as retailers and intend to do that as well as we can. So we buy from lots of Yorkshire and northern-based nurseries. Our scheme is as Mark's described as well in his report, quite different in that we intend to be a mix of retail and leisure, with the play and the adventure play, and restaurants being a significant part of what we do. So we do feel we will operate a very different business model to the guys over the road.
Yeah, so the question was really about the position and size of the existing garden centre or nursery. And I think that's been pointed out to us, hasn't it, Mark? Do you want to just outline that again with your cursor? Yeah, okay. Is that clear for you, Councillor Heselwood?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go back to buses. Apologies. I'm really unclear as to whether there is any bus provision at all to the site or not. Like, I know people are saying garden centres, only people with cars go to them, but I know that's not true, because I personally know plenty of people who will go to a garden centre like on a bus, not in a car, and just buy a few plants for their balconies or whatever. So, like, could we get a bit more information about what buses actually run there? And also, sort of as an addition to that, if you've got lower paid jobs on the site, how do you expect lower paid people to run a car to get to work without that bus provision?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Mark, public transport, accessibility.
This might be one for highways, might be able to give more details to where the nearest bus stop is. There are bus stops on Bradford Road. In terms of accessibility and policy T2, it is acknowledged that it's not completely accessible in terms of the public bus services in the immediate vicinity. And whilst that this approval, similar to in 2016, I think it has to be considered that I understand and appreciate what you're saying, that some people do go on bus, and I'd say there are some bus stops on Thorpe Lane and on Bradford Road. The frequency, though, however, doesn't meet the policy fully. However, on the whole, as it's previously been mentioned and is outlined in the officer's report, while some people will visit, and there is, for instance, proposals to improve connectivity in terms of pedestrian footpaths, and to enable people to visit on bike and to link those bus stops. It is understood that the majority of people will visit by car. So in terms of increasing bus capacity, it's like I say, it's more likely that this will generate people who do use their car, given the nature of the proposal and what the goods are being sold, and also in terms of the likes of the leisure uses, it is likely to be families that are going, and therefore again it is more likely that that would be in a car rather than on a bus or on bikes. But they are, compared with the previous approvals, and certainly compared with the 1988 approval that has extant permission and could be implemented, these proposals is a significant improvement in trying to get connectivity to the wider area.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Catherine in next, Councillor Brooks, and then invite you to come back. Catherine, would you like to comment on the bus service?
Yes. So the nearest bus stops are the Blackgates Primary School bus stops. It's about 700 meters south of the site, and it services 117 and 427 to Wakefield and Bradford, and it's an hourly service.
Thank you. Is there any scope, do you think, for negotiating with the bus companies on increasing that, Catherine? I'll let you ponder while Councillor Brooks comes back. Councillor Brooks, would you like to respond to those answers?
Yeah, Mark said that it's covered in the officer's report, but unless I've missed something, I can't actually see where that is. What page is that on, please?
Sorry, I was referring to the assessment of policy T2, but also I was saying that in the report it is acknowledged that it is more likely to be a car trip, that is, and in my presentation, as I was saying in the presentation, that the nature of the use is more likely to require a trip by car. But again, things like the electric vehicle charging points will be in line with policy, and every means of trying to make it as sustainable as possible has been looked at.
Thank you. However, it's a really good point to have raised, Councillor Brooks, and I'm sure it'll feature in the discussion. The accessibility for public not using cars is an interesting one. Your hand's still
Sorry,
up.
Chair,
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I've just got an additional question, if that's okay, Chair.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, could you define what a biodiversity unit is, please? Because it's mentioned, but never really explained what is meant by that. Anyone?
Are you on? You're on
Sorry,
mute, Mark.
apologies. I'm just trying to find which paragraph.
It's
it is in the
on page
report.
13. In the event that the final biodiversity calculations show a net loss of biodiversity units across the site.
In terms of paragraph 92, it gives a bit more information about the biodiversity matrix and how the units are measured. And so across the proposal seeks to, has been assessed by their ecologist and our ecologists, and at the moment they are approximately 6 units short, hence why there is, and the applicant has agreed that there is still ongoing assessment across the site. So the best time to look at the site in terms of biodiversity is actually in the coming month. So there will be still a bit more ongoing assessment from our ecologist and theirs. But on the basis of the ecological assessment that's been carried out to date, the development would create a shortage of 6 units. So the proposal is that they would, in line with our current policies, would contribute per unit of £25,000 for off-site biodiversity improvements. However, it is still believed that when an assessment in the coming months, there is scope there that actually that 6 units might be significantly less. So in terms of overall, though, policy-wise, it meets policy and will be biodiversity neutral, but at the moment there might be a contribution towards off-site biodiversity improvements.
And that's as well as it being carbon,
As well.
compliant.
So that's what makes it compliant with current policy.
Okay.
But overall, it's a significant. The biodiversity improvements are a significant improvement upon the 2016 proposal.
Thank you very much. I see no more questions. So can I invite comments, please, from members? So I've got Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Ray. Councillor Anderson.
To be honest, I'm conflicted over this one because I can see the jobs growth benefit. I can see the benefit of using a site that, well, it could be doing some work in it. Let's put it as diplomatically as that. And also with the number of housing allocations that are in the locality, I can see that a lot of those people will need access to facilities like a garden centre in order to make a home a home. So I can see those positive benefits. However, I am concerned about this development being in the green belt. I am convinced that I think this will actually have a negative effect on climate change. I cannot see, because of the dependence on car, this is in compliance with the strategy that the council are bringing, the transport strategy that both the council and WICA are bringing forward. I think there's a big divergence between what's going on there. I'm also not happy at the lack of the measurement of the positive effects in terms of what's going to happen here. I would have thought that that would have been something that might have been tried to set out more clearly as to why, on balance, we should go with this application. And the final thing is that there isn't any local endorsement by members enthusiastically that they support this use locally. So for those reasons, I certainly cannot vote for it, but I am conflicted in terms of the debate here.
Thank you. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Very much the same as Councillor Anderson. I think, bearing in mind, I do take some umbrage, if I'm honest, about presuming that families don't use buses and they only use cars, and I think that's in terms of phraseology, that's unfortunate. We as a council are aspiring via our planning policy and our other policies to make sites sustainable by accessibility, and we shouldn't just accept by default a site is preferred to cars rather than to public transport. I think bearing that in mind, the fact that it isn't meeting a biodiversity net gain, neutral maybe, but not a biodiversity net gain, which is again a council objective, also raises concerns for me. And I'm very much in the position as Councillor Anderson. I don't think I can vote against this, but I don't think I can vote for this either. And I will be considering, based on what my colleagues say, whether or not to abstain on this, because I don't think this is right yet.
Okay, well, I'll take a range of other comments before we pursue the debate further. Robert, Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I know this site exceptionally well. It is an eyesore site at this particular point. I think colleagues would have benefited from a site visit just to see how grotty and run down this is. Colleagues will have passed this if they're ever going down the M62 to get on to the M1 at this particular point, and you can see all of these horrible signs that are perched at the side of the road. It certainly doesn't enhance Greenbelt. If anything, it detracts quite significantly from it. Now, the Morley North and Morley South ward have 3,000 people on universal credit, most of those signing on as unemployed at this particular point. I suspect my Middleton colleagues have even higher rates than that at this particular stage, and it is inevitably the case that we're going to have to do whatever we can do to support local employment opportunities that exist, and this is going to create those opportunities. It is a a neutral application in terms of its impact on biodiversity and other issues. I think on balance, and it is difficult, it is an eyesore site, it is contributing nothing whatsoever in a positive way towards the green belt as it stands today. I think taking into account the levels of unemployment that I've got, and certainly the Middleton ward will have at this particular stage, I think on balance, taking it is neutral in terms of its carbon impact. This is an application that I can support. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this will be a large development. And I know we've been told repeatedly about previous permissions on the site. If I'm honest, I'm discounting the initial one, which work has notionally started, because it's so long ago it wouldn't be a viable application now. The last one, well, despite what's said, appears, according to the maps anyway, to have a much smaller footprint than the proposal. So we've got a large development, a destination development actually, because by their very nature and by its very nature, it will attract people to travel some distance to get there. Now, notwithstanding the fact it's a grotty site, and I don't doubt it is a grotty site, but simply because landowners allow sites to become grotty should not be in itself a reason for us to set aside greenbelt policy. And so I don't regard that as a sound argument. We were told the benefits outweigh the loss. Well, I've yet to have that really quantified for me. I appreciate there might be some jobs, but I haven't worked out why it's necessary for the site to occupy greenbelt when there are lots of other sites in the area. And the phrase "a small harm of development to the greenbelt" always strikes me as a bit worrying from officers, because once you lose greenbelt, you lose greenbelt forever. I'm concerned a bit about the retail, because if I look at the example of the garden centre in Otley, actually, the range of goods they sell has expanded over the years, and it's turned into a mini shopping centre now. So you can buy anything from food, clothes, pets, and occasionally you can buy a plant. One of the things that was discussed at length, actually, during the SAP meetings was about the greenbelt between Tingling and Middleton. And we were very concerned in those discussions, in that development plans panel, to ensure the greenbelt between those two remained open. And I worry that once you start creeping into this area, which is not of high landscape value, then we lose that greenbelt buffer. It is quite clear as well, in my opinion, that this is not a sustainable location. And I worry, I have to be honest with you, so I worry when officers say to us, effectively the bus network does not meet the policy fully, meaning, well, what's the point of the policy if we don't meet it fully? Because what we're asking for with the bus policy, or the frequency policy, is a minimum standard. So what you're saying is, not only does this not meet the minimum standard we would require, but it's well below the minimum standard. And the same is true with the biodiversity payment, isn't it? You know, the policy really says we should be producing this on site, rather than saying to a developer, you can buy out of it with a fixed sum of money, which might be spent somewhere else, but we don't know where as yet. And again, that worries me, that we take that as an acceptable principle. And finally, I have to say to you, and I did raise the issue, we haven't actually discussed the design of the building. And the reason I can't comment on that is because the drawings I've been provided with are so small that I really can't work out much in the way of detail. So at the moment I can't support this, but I would make a plea to officers that if in future we get something like this again, could we actually have some drawings of the buildings themselves that are big enough for me to read? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Mark, you've got your hand up. I'm presuming it's in response to the question or the comment that's just been made.
It was in the previous ones. I wondered whether it would be worth putting up some of the site photos that were on the presentation, Lewis, to actually see what the site is like for members.
Could we, Mark, could we not do that immediately? Could we pursue the debate and then do that?
That's fine.
Is that
that's
okay?
fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Because I know Councillor Heselwood has been waiting for some time. Councillor Heselwood.
Yeah, it's a very quick comment. Just on the jobs front, these don't have to be. I know that the comment was made that these would be, by the nature of the job, these would be lower paid jobs. But I just want to make the point that these don't have to be lower paid jobs. These can be whatever, whatever jobs and whatever pay we can pay. We should be looking to, at least as a council, we pay the absolute living wage, and we should be encouraging that across the city. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Heselwood. I think, as I can't see any more hands for the moment, could we then see these photographs again, please, Mark, that you were referring to before we continue and conclude the debate?
Lewis, are you okay putting on the screen the actual site views?
So talk us through these, please, Mark.
So in terms of these elevations, these show the cross sections through the site, and I thought it would be helpful for members to understand the amount of the re-landscaping, so that they can put in context what the impact of the development will be upon the surrounding views. And as you can see, some of the bunding and re-landscaping does significantly screen the proposal from views outside of the site, therefore having an impact on protecting the open character of the green belt. If I could ask Lewis to move to the pictures, if that's, I can't, Lewis, is it possible to move to the pictures on Fort Plain? Apologies, I'm still seeing the cross section.
Is the new pictures not appearing for you guys? Let me just.
So this is
for Lewis's benefit. Can you just be clear in terms of your descriptions of what the photograph is that you're after?
Yeah. Well, I want to just show you the ones from the road. So this is from site from Fort Plain, and in the site you can actually see there is building materials that are currently stored on there. The actual landscaping, you can see the front of the site, but that will actually all be re-landscaped, so that actually the views into the site are actually enhanced significantly in terms of green character. If you could go on to the one from the motorway, Lewis, that would be appreciated. And perhaps the one in the site as well might help members.
Thanks for that reminder. Can you return us to the debate now, please, Mark, if that's possible?
Sorry, yeah, apologies. Thank you.
Can you stop sharing the screen, please? Thank you, that's lovely. Okay, are there any more comments before I kind of summarise where I think we've got to with this? My feelings are that there are some quite important issues that have emerged from this debate. I mean, obviously the whole green belt issue, but in particular, the range of retail, the percentage of local employment, and I wonder if those things could actually be conditioned. The fact that employment and jobs, I can feel members are wanting a guarantee that a good percentage of those are going to be local. Perhaps that could be conditioned as well. And I do think there's two interesting questions been raised around accessibility by public transport, which for a facility like this, we would need to be accessible for a range of different people from different places. And also the biodiversity gain, which it's not demonstrating at the moment, and of course, which is a consideration that probably wouldn't have been given to it the last time we received an application like this. Would anyone like to add to any of those points I've made before I make a suggestion about the way ahead? I can't see any hands. Oh, Steve, did you want? Oh, I did see your hand for a moment, Councillor Hamilton. Did you want to speak? You're on mute.
I thought I had my hand up earlier.
Sorry,
Chair. Sorry. I was just going to say, you know, with the bus being hourly and far away, I was wondering, would they consider a shuttle service for the staff and for members of the public to use? You know, because obviously you can only access it according to this application via car, which is excluding a lot of people. You know, some of the elders like to go to the garden centre to have a look around and pick up a couple of plants, you know, but I would like them to look at a service to get people there, shuttle service, whatever, for their staff as well as members of the public, to stop excluding people who don't own a car.
Could I ask Mark to come in on that? Because actually I was going to raise that in concluding remarks, whether it would be possible for this garden centre to run a sort of shuttle bus facility for people wishing to use it that are not car owners.
Sorry, Chair, is that a question to myself or Mark, the actual owner?
Mark Farnsworth, please.
By all means, that's something that we can look at. We do at Tong have buses that come up from Pudsey on a weekly basis. We don't find that our staff ask us for any bus services. We have a bus stop which is about 400 metres from the centre, and that works well. I think the only other thing that I would add is relating to the sustainability side of cars. As Mark Jackson alluded to, we will be conditioned to 10% of the spaces being electric vehicle charging points. So that will be 61 spaces that we're planning to put in, just to add to the position.
Thank you very much. Steve, I can see you wanting to come in. Do you want to comment on the debate so far? I have a suggestion to make, but we can listen to you first.
Yes, please. I think I know where you're going with your suggestion, Chair. That's why I just wanted to jump in, to be honest with you. I just wanted to correct or clarify a couple of things. Councillor Campbell made a comment about being worried about officers when they say that things don't quite comply with policy. All applications, of course, may have some disparities with policy, because at the end of the day, everything is a balance, isn't it? And Mark said right at the very beginning of the presentation that this was a balance. If we ever get to a point where we achieve all of the council's policies, it would be a little bit of a surprise to me, because some of them do actually conflict with each other. But you probably all know that, having gone through the SAP process, etc., etc. But just moving on a little bit, we've already said that we could put a condition on that regarding the local employment initiative. That's just an omission, so that could go on. Condition 21 will have details about the maximum amount of retail space to make sure that that doesn't get out of hand. I just thought members should be clear of that. Also, an additional condition could be put on about the provision of a travel plan, particularly, I suppose, really regarding employees. But also, obviously, the applicant has offered to engage in talks with the a potential shuttle bus, which they already operate, excuse me, for Tom. So I just thought members should be aware of that before we went any further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And my suggestion is that we do actually defer this for another cycle and ask for those issues to be addressed specifically. And I think it's not just quantity of retail, Steve, I think it's range of retail as well. Colin, I happened to visit the Ottley Garden Centre the very day before I was briefed on this. To my astonishment, the range of retail was just amazing, and it was all open at a time in lockdown when non-essential retail was not supposed to be open. I was absolutely astounded, and I wouldn't want that to get out of hand at all in that way. So I actually think the range of retail, because most of the retail there, in my personal view, was completely irrelevant to the fact it was a garden centre. So my suggestion is that we do ask for conditions on local jobs, local employment, and on the range and quantity of retail, and that we particularly ask the developers to consider coming back to us with a biodiversity gain, with a clearer understanding of the design and nature of the buildings, and with a travel plan that specifically considers shuttle bus or similar arrangements for non-car users. Would anybody be prepared to propose that? I can see that Councillor Campbell wishes to come in. Colin.
No, I don't want to propose that, Chair. I was just going to Steve Butler got his usual digging at me about me always asking for plans to be policy compliant. And I'm not going to let it go, because, as you well know, what's the point of having policies if we don't try and achieve them? And so it seems to me unfortunate that what you appear to be saying, Stephen, I'm sure I'm misinterpreting this, is that actually we're never going to achieve policy on all these things, so we shouldn't really be trying. I think the bottom line for me is the whole point about our policies is we are setting minimum standards. And if we can't achieve minimum standards, I think it's a poor reflection upon ourselves. Thank you, Chair.
And I think, Councillor Campbell, that we're all with you in spirit on that. Absolutely. Councillor Ray.
I was going to say, Chair, I'm happy to propose that. I think that's a reasonable way forward, and it gives us room to obviously discuss this again. And I think particularly there needs to be, and I think to stress from my point of view, there needs to be a clear biodiversity net gain and not off-siting, particularly bearing in mind this has been built in the green belt. So they should be overall improving it rather than just trying to get to neutral and basically pay for it elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Before I ask
Chair,
yes,
sorry.
Steve. Oh, sorry, it's Councillor Hamilton. Yes.
Can I just say, can we have the drawings show better next time so that we can see? Because I mean the photographs and that. Can we have better photographs? And like Colin mentioned before, it's so tiny. I don't know what I'm looking at actually. So if we could have a better pictures and what is it, design, better design, showing larger so that we can see it.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Good suggestion. Thank you. Steve, could I ask you just to word the proposal that I'm trying to put forward for us so that we're clear?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. I just think I'd take out the one cycle because we might not achieve the one cycle.
Okay,
it might take longer than that. But I think what I mean, you might have to correct me about the range of things here because I was being with other things.
Yeah.
So defer for further discussions with the applicants regarding this, specifically the range of retail and condition, to make sure that obviously doesn't get out of hand. Investigate shuttle bus provision as the other site, the condition on employment, local employment, travel plan, more clarity on the biodiversity net gains for it to be positive rather than just neutral. I just want to make a point on that. I think Mark said right at the very beginning of the presentation actually that they were still thinking they would actually be neutral, and that the sums of money were only offered if that should be effectively a fallback position. But we'll certainly look towards getting into a positive net gain, and then better photographs of the site. I do apologise for the presentation not being done right at the very beginning, by the way, in its entirety. I'm not quite sure what happened there. But one thing I would say in response to Councillor Hamilton's request, we'll do our best on the drawings, but because of the scale of the site and the equipment that we're using, it's a little bit difficult, because if you remember on the slide of the elevations that filled the width of my monitor, and even then they were tiny. It's slightly a vagary of the fact we're having to operate on such small screens, but we'll do our best. Does that cover everything, Chair?
I think it does, and Paul will nod if he thinks it does as well. Yes, yeah. So Paul, Councillor Ray is going to propose that. Do I have a seconder for it, please?
Second, Chair.
Second, thank you, Councillor Brooks. That's lovely. So now we're going to take the vote on that proposal. So I will do the usual that we have to do with voting. I'll start at the top of the list of councillors present, and if you could indicate whether you are for, against, or abstain, please. Councillor Anderson.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor Finnegan.
For.
Councillor Hamilton.
For.
Councillor Heselwood.
For.
Councillor Reagan.
For.
Councillor Shemilt. I think you're on mute, Councillor Shemilt.
I am for, sorry.
You're for?
Yep.
And Councillor Ray.
For, Chair.
Thank you, and I am for as well. So that is one abstention, and all the rest have voted for. Can you just confirm that I'm accurate there, please, Andy?
Correct, Chair. So 10 members voted in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you. So that is clearly carried, and we'll look forward, Mark Farnsworth, to further discussions with you when it comes back to panel. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. Thank you. Before we move to the next item, I want to apologise to members. I do sometimes leave my mute off because as chair, I'm often making an intervention. And for some reason, my phone, despite the fact it's on silent, has suddenly decided not to be silent. It is ringing out. So I've taken this into the next room. I hope it doesn't continue to disturb us. OK, can we move on to item 8 then, please, which is Land Off Amberley Road, Upper Wortley.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'll start with the presentation if that's okay.
Thank you.
This site is brought to panel at the request of a ward member for reasons set out in the report. I might also add that all 3 ward members for this particular ward object to this planning application, and the reasons for the objections are set out clearly in the report. Can we have the next slide, please, Lewis? This is a red edge of the site in question here. It's located within the urban area within Upper Wortley. It's currently used as a self-storage facility with an abundance of containers in and around the site. And whilst we weren't able to carry out a site visit today, which obviously would have been useful, I'll try to portray a picture of the site through the use of photographs and description and the plans that I've got coming up. So it's currently in operation at the moment. In terms of the surrounding land uses, you've got the railway line to the north of the site, as you can clearly see. To the east, you've got some employment uses, which are served by the small access, Chelsea Close, just to the east, which comes off Amberley Road. Further to the southwest and south, as areas of housing and public open space. There's also a path that runs adjacent to the site that forms part of the public open space along the southwestern boundary. Beyond that is a local primary school. Along the western edge of the boundary, which is probably the most sensitive area of the site, there is a residential development known as Stradbrook Way and other associated roads. What's not clear from this plan is obviously changing levels across the site. The residential development to the west, Stradbrook Way, is elevated from the site, so it's a higher level than the red line edge. Towards the northwest corner, there is an apartment block rising to 3 stories. Also sharing a boundary with the site are some 3-story townhouses, and further to the site again, there is a line of 3 detached houses. They're all 2-story. With their side elevation orientated onto the site. Can we have the next slide, please, Lewis? Thank you. This is a planning application to, I suppose, seek to address concerns which have been arising on the site through enforcement issues. It's probably worth just taking you through the brief planning history, although that is set out in the report, but it is relevant to members' determination today. Permission was granted back in 2017 for a change of use of the land for a site which contained container storage areas, and that would be for the use of businesses and individuals, but for personal use. And that included 249 of these units, almost container shipping containers, if you like, bright blue in colour. Those units are used, as I say, for businesses, for storage facilities, for example. It may be shopkeepers or businesses that haven't got enough storage facilities within their business premises or shops. Conversely, it's also used for personal use as well, for people who might not have the storage facilities at their own homes, or people when they're selling houses and between homes, people like to store their personal belongings and equipment in such units, and those are rented out on a weekly basis. So that was permitted and approved back in 2017 with a number of planning conditions, most notably the hours of use. Because of the sensitive nature of the housing along the western boundary, we conditioned the use to Monday to Friday, 7 AM till 7 PM, on Saturdays 8 AM till 5 PM, and on Sundays 9 AM to 2 PM. We also imposed a number of landscaping conditions, boundary treatments, etc., just to control and mitigate the impact of the development. And that permission, and apologies, but I should have had a plan of the 2017 permission on the presentation, so it's my apologies for that. But that effectively showed a landscape buffer about 7 meters in width down the entire western boundary. So that would be the boundary running all the way down from the top, all the way down to the southern end on the western side. So that was devoid of any containers or any development. That was purely landscaping, and that was approved. However, the applicant chose to do something different and decided to not implement that landscaping buffer, and chose to, I suppose, install some of the containers along that western boundary, which consequently led to enforcement issues and enforcement cases being set up, most notably 2 separate enforcement cases. One in terms of the breach of the hours of use. It was effectively being used almost 24 hours a day, and information had been passed quite helpfully from local residents to notify us of that 24-hour use. It was also used very antisocially as well. You had, I think, reports of quad bikes being raced around the site and such like, and it certainly wasn't having any, it certainly was, sorry, having a significant impact on residents, hence the enforcement notice which we served, and now that's been withdrawn because they have reverted back to their permitted hours. The other enforcement issue, because of the installation of the cabinets, the containers along the western boundary, and the non-implementation of the landscaping, that was another separate enforcement planning contravention notice as well, and that is currently under consideration. It's in effect, if you like. On top of that, the applicant has sought to alter the 2017 permission through 2 separate planning applications prior to this. One was to extend the hours of operation, to which we refused, quite rightly, due to the impact on residents. And the second application was to try to, I suppose, not have any of the landscaping on the boundary, which we also refused as well. So those 2 applications were refused, which then led us to the current planning application, excuse me, and that is the variation of condition 2 of the 2017 permission. That's what we call a section 73 application, and that effectively seeks to vary condition number 2 of the permission, which listed the drawing numbers. So in essence, they are proposing to alter the layout of the previously approved application by rearranging the containers in a more intense form. And instead of having 249 containers that were permitted on the 2017 permission, they are proposing 373, so an increase of 124 containers. That also involves more intensive internal layouts to put the containers close together, all single story, with the exception of an area to the south of the site. And I don't know if members can pick up, there are some bluer units, thank you Lewis, that are located towards the southern end of the site that are slightly darker shaded than the rest of the units. Those units or those areas would be double stacked by containers. And members also note that there are no containers along the western edge of the boundary. That is now reverted back to a green buffer, with the exception of a number of car parking spaces which are highlighted in a pinky colour, and 2 porter cabins, which are the operational buildings for the site, which contain the staff, the security, and such like, where people check in and get the keys and access their units. So effectively, this proposal is to intensify the use, double stack some of the units towards the southern end, and put in the landscaping that they should have done as part of the 2017 permission. That landscaping strip varies in width from 7 to 8.5 metres, and our colleagues in the landscape team are fully happy with the landscaping scheme and the species that would be provided as part of the consent. The scheme includes 14 car parking spaces. Those are allocated or designated in pink, some along the western edge and some along close to Amberley Road. Access would be from Chelsea Close off Amberley Road, and the permitted hours would be exactly the same as the 2017 permission. So in terms of 7 AM till 7 PM Monday to Friday, and lower hours at weekends. Access for customers wouldn't be obviously be 24 hours a day. Those would be limited to the hours of operation. So you wouldn't have people coming and going at all hours. People wouldn't have their own keys for these lockups and containers. All the keys would be belong and administered by the staff on site, to which there are 8 full-time members of staff on site. As well as the hours of use conditions, we would propose to impose other conditions. So as a mechanism to ensure that the landscaping is imposed, for example, and to remove the containers which are unauthorised along the western boundary, we would be imposing a condition number 3, set out in the report, that prior to commencement of the development and the moving of the containers into a double stacked arrangement, that the landscaping scheme is implemented in full, and evidence of that implementation is provided to the local planning authority. In terms of public transport, I know members mentioned it on the previous application. Clearly, this would be a site where people would travel to it generally by car and by small vans, given the nature of the use. There are no bus facilities or a bus route on Alberley Road, as I've observed on my site visits. However, to the south on Oldfield Lane, there is a bus route, that's 350 metres to the south, and to the north on Tingling Road, there is a bus route, that's 300 metres away, as you would walk. Members might have concerns as to, if permission is granted, well, when is this going to happen? Because the applicant hasn't abided by the 2017 permission and put in the landscaping. Having spoken to the applicant, they are making assurances that they would want to implement this permission if members are so minded, and they would want to do that in the next few months. So they are keen to do this and to move the containers and to get that landscaping in place. We're also mindful of the antisocial behaviour that's taken place in the past. Hence, we've imposed an additional condition that we didn't have on the 2017 permission. That's condition number 16. That requires the applicant to submit a management plan for agreement, and that would cover how the site is managed to avoid antisocial activities and to minimise any disturbance to the residents on Stradbrook Way to the west of the site. So members, are open to make a view. They have to consider the scheme on its individual merits. If this is approved, this would be a mechanism to ensure that the landscaping is reinstated. If it isn't approved, the local planning authority still has the ability to enforce the 2017 permission insofar as the containers are not sited in the correct position and the landscaping is not in the correct position also. Just moving further on to some more slides and the photographs. Next slide, please, Lewis. These are the containers that are currently on site as per the planning approval. As you can see, they're a very utilitarian appearance in their visual appearance. porta cabins, or the cabins, measure roughly 6.1 meters by 2.4 meters and about 2.5 meters in height. So if double stacked, those would be just over 5 meters in height. Next slide, please. This is a view from Chelsea Close, looking at the access into the site with trees in the background beyond, which would the residential properties beyond. Next slide, please. This is a view from the adjacent public open space, appreciating the difference in levels, looking down onto the site. And here you can see the absence of any landscaping that's taken place, abutting the site boundaries with the fencing. As part of the application, those would be shifted away from the site and landscaping introduced to soften the impact. Next slide, please, Lewis. That's a view from the public open space also. There are some landscaping in place at the moment. Some of the landscaping and trees are outside the site within the public realm. Additional planting would be put inside the site as well to double up. Next slide, please. That's a view looking from the public open space. You've got a terrace of residential properties on the right with the rear of the business units that are on Chelsea Close in the background. Next slide, please. That's the view from the residential properties to the west. There's a row of 3 detached houses that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. That's the end of the small private drive that serves those. And as you can see, there is a lack of boundary screening, vegetation along that boundary. So in that particular location, you would have a 7 to 8 meter buffer strip. Next slide, please. Slightly to the north of those houses, there's an apartment block which is to the left, 3 stories, and to the right, that's the gable end elevation of 3-story townhouses, which also back onto the site as well. Beyond the bins which serve the apartments, there's a drop in levels onto the site. But beyond that boundary, there are the containers which are not in the correct location at the moment. Next slide, please. Again, that's a view from the public open space, and appreciating the difference in levels looking onto the site. I think if you can look to the top right-hand corner between 2 residential tower blocks, and it's difficult to see, but that's Bridgewater Place there. Next slide, please. This is the northern plan, which shows the tree protection fencing, which would go in as part of the scheme. Next slide, please. And the southern portion, which would show the trees to be protected along the western boundary, and those along the southern boundary as well. Next slide, please, Lewis. And that's an overview of the site plan indicating the landscaping buffer on the western side, save for the car parking spaces and the porta cabins, which are the administrative headquarters, none of which back onto residential properties, and in any event do provide an element of buffer planting, but not to the extent of the buffer planting which borders the residential properties. That concludes the presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Thank you. You're on mute, Chair. Sorry, that's your line.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We didn't have any speakers on this item until very recently, but I think, Steve, we've got a ward councillor wishing to speak on this item.
That's correct, Chair. Councillor Blackburn is on the meeting.
Okay, well, I can use discretion to allow Councillor Blackburn to speak, but it is for a maximum of 4 minutes. And then Anne, I'll have to stop you at that point. Thank you. Please go ahead if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been a problem ever since it was, ever since it was agreed, with noise and the fact that no landscaping has ever been done, and of course it was passed as has been mentioned in 2017. It's the condition on landscaping. The company have tried to reduce the amount of landscaping from the condition. They've also tried to increase the hours of opening, hence 24 hours. And the hours have never, ever been kept anyway. So there is a problem for the residents with noise. And then, of course, these containers, being bright blue, stand out like a sore thumb. And whilst I accept not all the houses on that estate can see them, a fair amount of them can, because, as has been stated, some of the properties are 3-storey, and some of them, as also been mentioned, the 2-storey ones can see them. I was up there about a week ago, and again, you know, and it's just as if, well, let's put it this way, if I was living there, I wouldn't want to be just coming out of my house and seeing these bright blue monstrosities. But I would like to see it turned down. They've had plenty of opportunity to do something about this. I'm not convinced if this planning application goes through that the company will do anything about it. And so I think the history is there. If people have read the paperwork, that they can see there's been a problem with them with landscaping all along, and now what they put there is containers, no landscaping. They've just chose to put a line of containers. There isn't any proper fencing. Just so, as you can see from the photos, people can see straight through the fencing on these containers, just a line of containers down instead of your landscaping. And I know they say they'll do landscaping now, but they've been saying that since 2017. The landscaping they're saying that they will do now is seems to be in line with what our officer thinks it is okay. But as I said, they flouted it from 2017 till now, and they flouted the hours from day one. And I just don't think it's fair on the residents. Those houses were there before this company was, that they should have to put up with the problems that they've had. You know, we've had quad bikes, we've had people going on site, and this is what the local residents have told me. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, shuffling stuff around in the containers, making noises, coming and going. Lunch at weekends, we've had quad bikes going around the area.
It's been 4 minutes, Chair.
Sorry, that have been stored in those containers. So there is a lot of personal use, and the people that's using them aren't using them very well.
Thank you, Anne.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you
there.
very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So, in the light of what the ward councillor has just said, Adam, can you clarify for us what would the consequences be if we approve this application? There is a likelihood, is there not, that the applicants would continue to behave as they already are? If we refuse the application, what would the implications of that be?
I suppose it's purely speculative if the applicants continue to do what they've been doing, even if we approve it. I think we have to have that in mind, but disregard it and have regard to the planning merits of this particular planning application. What they're proposing here is I suppose is a proposal to move the containers, which are not supposed to be in that location anywhere, and to provide the landscaping that was supposed to be provided. If we refuse it, then the panel have to be clear what the reasons for refusal might be, what policies it's contrary to, not purely on a speculative basis on how the applicants previously operated. I've been in discussions with the agent. They know that the agent or the applicants haven't acted fully responsibly. They fully acknowledge that, and they want to rectify the situation by proposing something else to address the issues. So if members are minded to refuse it, then they need to be clear on what the planning reasons would be and what the policies would be in terms of what it would be contrary to.
Thank you for that advice.
Okay.
Do I have any questions for Councillor Blackburn, please? Councillor Anderson.
Right, yes, Anne. What working with you as local councillors and local residents have the applicants done? How often do they meet with you? How often do they brief you? And how often do they talk to you about issues that they've got with running the site?
They never have.
Right, well, that's a simple and straightforward answer.
Simple as that,
That's a
yes.
simple and straightforward answer. That's fine. That answers that particular one. Okay, I'll leave it there because I want to ask officers some of the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Mine is to the officer, not Anne.
Okay, I can't see any more hands, so I'll take you now, Councillor Hamilton, if you have a question for officers.
Yes, mine is to Adam. With regards to you saying that there's been enforcement action taken with them, I just want to know the enforcement action. What's the outcome? What have they done what they've been asked to do to remove the containers? Apart from submitting this application, what has been done with regards to them putting the buffer fence, etc. Because if they've had enforcement action, and what's the outcome? Is it just a letter they've received and they've done nothing? Because now they've submitted another application. So if we approve it, is it just going to be the same? I mean, I know you're saying that they're going to move it, they're going to stop this, they're going to do that, but I'm having problem with this because if they're not prepared to carry out the landscaping before, what make us think they're going to do it now? So yeah. I just want an answer about enforcement, because they come down very hard on my residents with minor things. To me, this is very major. So what has been done?
Yeah, so two enforcement issues really, which are all interlinked. One was the breach of conditions in terms of the hours of use, so they've been operating beyond their permitted hours. We served a breach of condition notice, and that has led to them then not operating 24 hours a day. And as far as I've been informed by colleagues enforcement, they've reverted back to the authorised hours. The other enforcement breach of condition notice relates to the, I suppose, non-compliance with the siting of the cabins and the lack of landscaping. That's still pending. That hasn't been resolved yet because at the moment we've got a planning application in to address those issues, and advising members, then we wouldn't normally take enforcement action against an applicant when we've got a planning application pending. We need to go through considering the merits of that first before we reach the point of taking enforcement action. So appreciate the concerns from members in terms of the applicant and how it's breached the conditions, but we feel that we've addressed them, and it's still, I suppose, up in the air insofar as the current siting is concerned and the landscaping, and that's what this planning application will help to sort out and resolve.
Yeah, just to re-emphasise that last point that you've made, Adam, this application is to rectify the problems that exist. That's the purpose of it, isn't it?
It is, yes. And that's not to say that the 2017 permission is wrong, because if members do not want to support this application for whatever reason, we still have the ability to pursue enforcement action against the applicants to ensure compliance with the 2017 permission.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Right, sorry about that. I was getting my button sorted out. Right, a number of things. If we were to approve it, this is probably a question more for Mr. Carr as the person who is in overall charge of enforcement. What reassurances can you give us as a panel that something will be done this time about enforcement? Because I think most of us have probably got experiences ourselves of enforcement doing little or nothing to enforce anything at the moment, to be quite frank. So what assurances can you give us on that? I've got a number of other questions, but if we can start with that one, which is what reassurances can Mr. Carr give us that action will be taken if non-compliance continues?
Councillor Anderson, I'm really sorry to cut across you, but Chair, I think the applicant is available to speak, and I'm not sure if they've been given an opportunity for 4 minutes. Steve, might you confirm? Because we're hearing into questions of officers, so I just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah, well, yeah, we should have moved on to them. I was just holding fire just to see what was brought out of it, Nikki, to be honest with you. But yes, the applicant is here.
I just wonder if we ought to just take a pause. Councillor Anderson, we'll bank the question that you've asked.
That's fine.
I'm just conscious of the protocol that we would ordinarily follow, so I'm grateful. Thank you.
Okay, Steve. So is it Jeremy Williams who is here?
Yes, Chair, it is.
Yes. And you're advising me, Nikki, that we need to give Jeremy 4 minutes to speak if he wishes to.
We would normally allow the applicant to speak, but it's been done in reverse order. I'm
okay.
Not sure, but the applicant is here, so it seems for the purpose of fairness and parity that they be given an opportunity as well, so that members got a full sphere of the position. And yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, would you like to speak for a maximum of 4 minutes?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Yes, please come forward then.
Thank you. Chair, members, the applicant owns and operates this containerised self-storage facility and has been operational for over 4 years. The popularity of self-storage has grown enormously over the last 20 years, with many households requiring extra storage due to a lack of available space at home, and many businesses requiring storage space for filing and business equipment. Solid containers are set out across the site, which will allow ease of access for customers. There are a number of examples up and down the country of this type of facility, which has proven extremely popular for those wishing to benefit from low-cost storage in a secure environment. You will have noted from the planning officer's presentation, there is a related planning history which stemmed from the popularity of the self-storage facility and the keenness of the applicant to assist new customers in their requirements. We have sought to work closely with your professional officers, both planning and enforcement, in terms of agreeing a compatible scheme which takes containers away from the western boundary, closest to the residential dwellings on Stradbroke Way, and double stack some of them in the southern section of the site and towards the more commercial end of the site. Chair, since the initial teething problems a couple of years ago, the site has been run impeccably, and the applicant knows that granting planning permission is incumbent on him putting in the landscaping scheme which has been accepted by your officers as being well designed. As evidenced in the officer's report, there are no technical reasons to withhold the grant of planning permission on environmental or highway grounds. And whilst the officer summed up in his conclusions the initial failures of the applicant, these have genuinely been sought to be resolved, with only the new landscaping proposals to be implemented. Chair, this is an extremely viable business and one that is well patronised with an established customer base. A number of jobs rely on these proposals, and the applicant will commence work on the landscaping scheme immediately in accordance with the conditions that will be attached to the grant of planning permission. When assessed against relevant core strategy policies, it is concluded the application proposals are policy compliant, subject to the conditions to be imposed should planning permission be approved. I would just like to touch very briefly on some of the comments made by Councillor Blackburn. In relation to the hours on the site, I believe the planning officer highlighted that they do operate now within the restricted hours, and those are the hours that were set on the planning condition. There is also an on-site management plan to be agreed through condition discharge, and again, that should deal with some of the concerns that have been raised in relation to how the site is run and managed. There are people on there the whole time in terms of member of staff within the cabin, and as highlighted, people go to the cabin to get the keys before they access the storage container. I would just say finally, Chair and members of the panel, please can I urge you to uphold the recommendation of your officers and grant the conditional planning permission accordingly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Are there any questions, please, for the speaker? Councillor Ray, was that a question for the speaker? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate the sentiments being put forward by your client, but why did they not comply with the previous planning conditions, and what faith or should we have that they will do so going forward?
Councillor, yes, and I think the client was really focused on trying to get the development underway, and I think with the popularity of it and the number of inquiries he had, which I guess is evidenced up and down the country with the success of these schemes, he was keen to kind of press ahead. But acknowledging we do need to put that landscaping buffer in place. It's 7 to 8.5 meters wide, and he is committing to do that. So, and I think as well with the enforcement action that's been carried out, again, that enforcement action, I think, as your planning officer highlighted in relation to the landscaping, is still pending, so that there is a means there. But the client is committed to doing that.
Thank you. Any further questions for the speaker?
Sorry, can I come back, please, Chair?
Yes, of course you can.
Appreciate what's been said there, Mr. Williams, but clearly your client puts commercial considerations before planning regulations by exactly what you've just said. So again, what confidence do we have as a panel, and how can you reassure us that they will not put commercial interest beyond actually engaging properly with the authority and following the planning permission that they've been given, if they're giving it?
Yeah, Councillor, I mean, we've obviously worked with your officers through the course of this application of the various issues that have come up. Our client is committed to putting that landscaping scheme in, and that is what he will be doing. It is a substantial landscaping buffer, and I can only say that his commitment is to that, to put it in.
Okay, I don't think we can say much more than that at this stage, Councillor Ray, but we get your point. So we will return to Councillor Anderson's question to officers now, and any other indication for questions to officers, please. Councillor Anderson, do you want to just paraphrase it again, please?
Oh, just briefly, just to Mr. Carr, as to what assurances can he give the panel that enforcement action will be taken? Because as I was saying, we've all got examples of where enforcement have not been doing work in our own individual wards. So this is not just, with great respect, Anne, a Farley and Wortley issue. It's one that's citywide. So what reassurances can he give us that there will be action taken this time, and taken timelessly? Because we do seem to let things go on for a while. I mean, we must have known since 2017 that there was non-compliance. It's now 2021. So what's been happening in the interim 4 years?
Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, as members will appreciate, we have had significant difficulties in the last year, both in pursuing our normal enforcement activities due to the COVID restrictions, but also more latterly, we've had people retiring at very short notice, including the sort of head of the enforcement service, which has inhibited in some way. But that's not to say we've stopped all enforcement action by any means. There still has been pursuance of actions. We have continued to serve enforcement notices and breach of condition notices as appropriate, albeit not to the same level that we would wish to do so. But in terms of this particular site, I mean, clearly this is a culmination or the conclusion of pressure that's been exerted on the applicant to come forward with a scheme or to comply with the previous requirements of the planning permission. And that's very much how we would see it from an enforcement perspective. Clearly, if they don't implement this permission, then we would pursue the appropriate action, serving or pursuing the breach of condition notice as appropriate. So it is very much, from our perspective, seen as a last chance saloon for the applicant to get it right this time. So if we can give that as an assurance that we will be sort of prioritising this going forward, then I think that's probably as far as we can go at this point until a decision's made on this application.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Barry?
It answers that one.
Yeah.
But right, in terms of the hours of operation, if an organisation is marketing itself as a 24-hour operation, how do officers square that circle. Because if you're marketing yourself or something, it might be perfectly right that it should be 24 hours. In other words, they're marketing it for 24 hours, but we're saying, no, it's only going to be for a limited period. So the chances of non-compliance are increasing because their marketing tool, if I was a customer or a client of an organization that said they were available 24 hours a day, I would expect them to be there. And if I turned up at 11 o'clock at night, needing to get something that might be essential that is held in one of those sites, I would then expect someone to come along with the key, let me into the unit that I have paid for. How can we enforce that? What suggestions have officers got to try and help what's going to happen here? I mean, how can we do something? What conditions can we do, and what can we actually put in?
So, Adam, do you want to come back on that one first?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yes, I was thinking the same actually when I looked at the name of the company. Obviously, I've not been involved from the start for this. Some of you will be familiar with my appearances on North and East, and this is my first appearance on South and West team. Having said that, yep, I looked at the website for the applicant. It is called 24 Secure Storage. It's not called 24-hour secure storage, 24, but that might imply 24-hour use. Having said that, the website, it contains their opening hours, and those are in line with the approved planning condition number 7 on the 2017 permission. So they're advertising it in accordance with the permitted hours. There would be 24-hour, I suppose, security surveillance of the site in that respect, and storage facility allows 24-hour storage. So in that respect, if they are currently complying with the conditions, and that's what's advertised on their website as a potential new customers looking to store goods there, then we can only be comforted by that, but also have the comfort and emphasis that we would impose the same condition to tie in with those 2017 conditions, and we have the ability to enforce that, evident from the previous enforcement action where we served a breach condition notice, which led to them not operating 24 hours, and it reverted back to its permitted hours. So I think that's all the comfort I can give, other than listening to what the applicant's agent has said as well.
I accept what the applicant's agent said, but if the local ward members are of the opinion that it is operating outside of those hours, and it's been reported and there is still an ongoing case within enforcement, there must be some grain of truth in what the ward members are saying. So,
Barry, I think we're getting into comments there, and I'm with you, drift of
thought. What the question is the question is effectively, if we've got evidence from the ward councillors and the fact that we've got an ongoing case, I can't, I need something more. I need a sense of what you could put on as further conditions, and what you can do to make sure that they are definitely complying, because you can't have an officer there 24 hours a day checking to see what's happening. You've got to rely on the evidence. So what evidence would you need in order to ensure compliance? What can we put in place to ensure compliance?
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. We can't employ an enforcement officer on site just to check when customers are coming backwards and forwards, quite clearly. We are relying on members of the public to help facilitate that, and we appreciate their advice and their observations, and primarily that's what a lot of enforcement work comes from, observations of the local public. So we'll be acting upon the information provided and evidence provided by local residents to act upon any breaches of condition in terms of the hours. Whilst we did serve a breach of condition on the hours, that case was closed because, as far as I'm aware, and according to officers within compliance, they had reverted back to their permitted hours. The ongoing case relates to the siting of the cabins and the lack of landscaping. So two related issues, but separate topics, if you like.
I'll leave it to other people now. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I think what members would need to be reassured of, Adam, is that swift action would be taken if non-compliance was observed. I think some of us feel that's a very long time indeed. is expired before action is taken, even after non-compliance has been made aware. I think that's probably where the average elected member's head is in this.
Yeah.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Right. So we are now confident that the only planning condition on their previous application that they're not currently complying with is the planting zone or planting buffer and the location of containers within that, what should be the planting buffer. There's nothing else.
Yeah, it's I suppose it's a proposal to address the issues associated with enforcement, whilst also intensifying the use of the site as well by having more storage cabins on site with the double stacking and the alterations to the arrangement.
Well,
is the non-compliance confined to the two issues of the landscaping and the position of storage units?
It is, yeah. That's what that application seeks to resolve, those non-compliance issues.
Okay.
And the hours of use would be duplicated by the imposition of the same condition.
Can I get it clear in my mind then? Actually, they could comply with the old plan by simply moving the containers that are in the place they shouldn't be and doing the landscaping work. What they're actually applying for is an intensification of use on the site.
In addition, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. In effect, if members agreed to approve this permission, they wouldn't have to comply with it and implement. They could choose to revert back to the 2017 permission. So effectively, they'd have two choices of permission to implement.
Sorry, the 2000 and whatever it was, 17 permission sets out an area landscape that is the same as the one shown on the drawing you sent us.
Is that correct, Adam?
No, it's different. The area along the western boundary is devoid of any parking areas and cabins whatsoever. That entirely complies or
Thank you.
complies of buffer planting.
There wasn't a before and after map. That's.
I know, and I apologise for that. I should have had the consent from 2017.
Okay, can I just ask a couple of quick questions? I notice if you go around there, actually, there's a substantial amount of car parking stroke caravan storage on site. Is that covered by the planning permission?
It's not certainly not shown on the approved plans from 2017. That only shows the areas of cabins on site. Having said that, it does fall within the use class B8, so that would encompass other storage areas as well.
You could store a caravan on the site instead of a container.
It's clearly not shown on the 2017 permission. What is shown is just an area and a layout of containers. So technically, it doesn't comply with the approved layout from 2017.
So that's another planning condition it's not compliant with then.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it doesn't conform with the layout of the 2017 permission.
Right,
and
so
this current application proposes a different layout, more intensive, and that layout doesn't show any caravans on site.
Yeah, but what you're saying to me is the old one didn't either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if that's a particular issue with members or the local community, then we'd have to consider taking separate enforcement action against that.
Well, I'm simply asking the question because there appears to be other things that aren't quite right with the with the previous application, which we're being asked to effectively intensify the use of. Can you just put the map of the drawing up of the layout, because I need to ask a question about.
Yep. Can we go to the presentation, please, Lewis? Yep, there we are.
Can I ask, in relation to that, which is staff car parking and which is visitor parking? And do we think it's enough?
Well, there's 14 spaces in total. There's no distinction between which ones are staff and customers according to the submitted layout. The pink annotation just says 14 car parking spaces, so there's no demarcation of which is which. Perhaps if members are concerned, I think maybe the parking in the far right-hand side, eastern side, could be staff car parking because customers would prefer to park near the building. So if members are concerned,
I think that might be logical.
yeah, definitely.
Can I ask you a final question about the bottom of the site, which I assume is the southern end?
Correct.
Where we're showing the very bottom, you show a line of dark blue, which I assume is double stacked.
Yes.
Containers. And then further south from there, there's a line of what look like single stack containers. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, the darker blue is the double stacked.
How do you access the single stack containers?
That's a very good question, and with Chair's permission, perhaps it's a question to ask Mr. Williams.
Yes, Mr. Williams, can you answer that point for us, please? You're either on mute. Oh,
Marv. Yeah, no, I think you'd have to use the hard standing area to the front of it, and then you would have to go around the back to get at the container. You'd have to be, in terms of any vehicles or any main activity, it would be towards the front on the grey area.
How would you get in the doors of the container if that area in front of it is planted up with shrubs and bushes and trees?
It would be a case of looking at the detailed landscaping scheme. I mean, that would have to be looked at, I think, with the way those ground floor containers operate, then I think in relation to the site management plan. And also, I think looking at how you'd access them potentially through that from the grey area to the front. Because the landscaping scheme does show, as you say, landscaping to the rear, and that'll be put in place.
Can I jump in there? Because I think I've got the answer. I'm just looking back on the 2017 permission, and of the units that were proposed, a number of those were proposed to be double units, i.e. 12 metres in length. So I think those units at the bottom, Councillor, are double length units. So the access point will be from the hard standing to the north.
Are we conditioning that?
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Councillor Campbell, your last comment.
Sorry, I just asked, are we conditioning that?
Yes.
Perhaps it might be advantageous to put an annotation on the plan, point out which are the double length units, and then it's logical how they would be accessed. Would that make more sense, perhaps?
Well, I think if they're double length units, then I can understand how you get into them.
So we just need that point confirming, I think, Adam.
Yes.
That's correct, Chair. Sorry, that's correct. I think so. We can put an annotation on the plan if that's helpful. For the
okay.
And then maybe put an access point from the north. So there's what we don't want, I think, from what panel's perspective, is people entering the buffer zone and trashing it, basically.
Exactly.
So it's 100% clear the access is only from the north.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So I've got Councillor Brooks, and I will get to you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Brooks next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about this intensification, this double stacked area. What increase in noise is expected to be for the local residents, and what impact on visual amenity? Because it's really not clear from the information that we've been given how tall it's going to be and what the visual impact of that is going to be.
Yes, you're quite right. I mean, two issues there. Visual impact is quite critical, and impact on the immunity of residents. And I think that's where site visits are, very, very useful and helpful to make members' decisions. In terms of the height, a standard unit is 2.4 metres in height. So two together would be 4.8 metres in height. So looking at, I suppose, a standard house type, if you like, they're generally about 5.5 metres to the eaves level. So it would be slightly lower than the eaves level of a standard two-storey house. Clearly, it would have a greater visual appearance than what's there at the moment by doubling the height of it. But in the context of the I suppose, mixed area with employment uses and other industrial uses in the area, the limited number of units which will be double stacked, officers are of the opinion, and in association with the additional landscaping, that we think the impact is acceptable. In terms of noise and disturbance, again, inevitably with more comings and goings and a greater intensification of the site, there will be a marked, slightly marked increase in activity with comings and goings. But again, it is in an employment area. Other employment uses on the land would be acceptable, but with the conditions in place, that still limits the hours of operation to what we deem to be acceptable levels.
Just come back, Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
What's the level of the site itself? Like, is the southern part lower down or higher up? Like, is it a sort of wobbly sort of site, or is it quite flat? Because obviously, without site visits, we've not been able to.
Absolutely, yeah,
look.
yeah. Can we go back to the site photographs, please?
Well, I mean, site photographs only give you a small section of a site, don't they? They don't give you a cross section of a site.
Indeed, indeed. Well, the majority of the western boundary is elevated above the site by 2 to 3 meters in height, depending on where the section is thrown through the site. So at single story level, a lot of the containers are below the level of the ground to where the residential properties would be. Clearly, by double stacking them, it has a greater visual impact, and then it would be higher than the level of the land to the west in terms of the ground levels are concerned. So you're going to be able to see the containers, and hopefully with the landscaping that will mitigate the impact. Obviously it changes from season to season. So officers are saying, look, these aren't going to be invisible, you're going to see them. It probably doesn't help that they're bright blue, but that's the applicant's choice. So I think, you know, it's just a judgment view as to whether the level of harm is unacceptable, really. And an officer's view is that it is acceptable. Of course, members are entitled to reach a contrary view.
Has a site cross section been given, show the difference in levels? Is that available? Because at the moment, I don't feel that I've been given enough information about this.
Yeah. I haven't seen a plan which shows the cross section of the site to show the double stacked units.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Brooks, that you'd like to ask at this point before I move on?
Yeah, I think in terms of the noise, I'd like a bit more information about the noise, because obviously if there's more machinery is going to be used, what sort of decibel levels are we talking about there?
Well, we've taken advice from colleagues in environmental health who've looked at the current situation, appreciating that is unauthorised. And their advice is by moving the cabins further off the boundary, which will then mitigate the impact. They are of the opinion that the noise implications are within acceptable limits, and they don't object.
Okay, so what are the actual numbers for the decibel levels?
Let's have a look at them. Go back to the report. Just bear with me while I just bring up the environmental health comments. Just bear with me a second. So yeah, removal of the units from the western side of the site results in the removal of potential barrier from noise from other parts of the site. However, as the properties are approximately 3 to 4 meters above the units of the site, the amount of attenuation they provide could be negligible. As there is no longer planned units on the west side of the site, this will reduce the loading and unloading vehicle activity near the housing on the western side. So I expect an overall improvement of noise on the site. This may be slightly offset by increasing units on the south side by doubling up, which may lead to an increase in activity.
So just to be clear then, there's not been a proper noise consultation carried out on the site?
The environmental health officer says the units will be further away from the residential and equates to approximately 12 decibel noise reduction from the point source, i.e. the individual properties, and approximately 6 decibel noise reduction for the line of source in terms of the traffic. So there is a quantifiable decibel noise reduction by removing the.
What's the current decibels that residents are having to deal with?
I haven't got that information to hand, I'm afraid.
Councillor Brooks, we'll move on. I think that question is answered. Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Anderson, please.
That's my question, Chair.
Oh, sorry, your hand was still up, Colin. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, it was a partial follow-up to a question that Kayleigh just asked. On building sites, because of health and safety requirements, when a vehicle is reversing, it needs to have a beeper on it. And whilst the site might not have customers coming in 24 hours a day, there is nothing to stop the business being operated by its operators for longer periods of time in terms of moving stock, moving things around. Are there any restrictions we can put on in terms of, because they need to have something for health and safety. So what can we do to try and protect that? Because if that events are taking place later at night, the chances are that there's less noise in the surrounding area, which means that the noises of the beepers will go on. Anybody who lives near a major building site will know what happens during on a daily basis with the vehicles reversing back and forth. What can we do to resolve that one?
Yeah, I could probably point to condition 16. That could encompass the management of the site, not only during operational hours, but during when customers are open, but also at times when it's not open, when the staff on site, how they mitigate the impact of any vehicles moving in and around the site. Because clearly you have reverse beepers on some commercial vehicles for health and safety reasons, and it might be the case that we can encompass that within condition 16.
Okay, if it can be explicitly set out, fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't see any more questions at this stage, so could I invite comments, please, and views? Barry, is that a new hand?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can't support this. I just cannot support this. The previous, in terms of the document that I was sent a number of years ago as to what is a material and a non-material consideration, the ones I personally would be putting forward a motion and will be putting forward a motion, subject to getting someone to second it, of course, is that we refuse this on visual impact grounds, because visually it's not going to look good. Even if you change the colour of the containers, it's not going to make a difference. I think visually it's out. The noise levels, I think, are another reason for refusing the application. The noise levels, because we've got no baseline noise levels. There's nothing in any conditions to say that regular noise level studies need to be taken and published to make sure that we do get compliance. And that then goes back to the point that was made earlier by Mr. Carr, that if he gets the evidence, so that we can take compliance action, so that we can be on top of it, rather than waiting on residents to complain, that we can proactively do something about it. Because if it's breaching noise levels and we're being told about it, we can actually proactively do these things in terms of, and also in terms of the movement of vehicles, that if we get that information, planning enforcement can proactively do it. And the other one is planning history. All you need to do is look at the planning history in terms of, in the section starting from section 14 onwards, the lack of compliance and the lack of enforcement. So I also don't think they've worked well enough and kept local councillors and local residents informed. I am concerned that the double stacking will be visually intrusive. If the landscaping isn't done properly, how long is it going to take to sort it out, and what impact will that have on the neighbouring people if we don't get full compliance? The local residents are certainly concerned about noise, so I think we've got to give a lot of weight to that in terms of what's happening. I accept what is not a material consideration is whether or not the applicants will or will not do what they've promise, but I do think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to say something to our enforcement department to look at ways of rigorously enforcing. So subject to someone seconding it, I would be bringing forward a motion that we refuse this application. Thank you.
Barry, before I put that to panel, there are people who already have indicated
Yes,
they'd like to make a comment. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually inclined to agree with my colleague, Councillor Anderson there. I'd just like to add on top of what he said, though, that I'm really quite disappointed with the amount of information given by the applicant with regards to, you know, like I mentioned with the site levels and the visualizations of what it might look like. Like, all we've got are a few photographs. I'm really not very impressed by the level of information that's been provided. The noise is something that I'm very concerned about, and the impact on the visual amenity of residents as well.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I should have asked a question of legal officers earlier on.
I will permit you to do so now, Colin.
Oh, too kind. In the past, when we've had what I suppose you might describe as difficult uses, where there's a history of perhaps flexibility of compliance towards certain planning conditions, we have in the past asked developers to, in effect, sign a legal agreement as opposed to simply a planning agreement with the council that they will stick to a particular condition, say the hours, for example. Would that be possible if the applicant was prepared to do it, was to do it on this site? That's my question. I may make a comment later.
Okay, so Nikki, are you able to respond to that?
Yeah, of course. So strictly speaking, it's the conditions that are the primary area of compliance which the applicant ought to, you know, comply with. That's its legal purpose. We shouldn't be seeking to duplicate what a planning condition could do through a legal agreement. And if I'm honest, Councillor Campbell, it's far easier to enforce non-compliance with a planning condition than a Section 106 agreement. There might be some distinctions in terms of mixed use where a 106 might be appropriate, but I wouldn't advise members to follow that route in this case.
Well, if it's more difficult to enforce a 106 than it is a planning condition, it must be really, really difficult to enforce a 106 because it's very difficult to enforce a planning condition.
Thank you. Before I proceed, I am aware that Councillor Ray had his hand up for a very long time and then put it down again. Do you want to have an opportunity, Councillor Ray?
No, it's fine. I heard most of what was being said while my computer was deciding not to work, so my actual question was answered at the time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So, Colin, do you want to make a comment?
Well, I think like all members, our view, we wouldn't be human if we didn't have our views coloured by the fact that the current application is not being complied with, and not being complied with in a fairly serious way. So the landscaping, there's been an issue with the hours. As I say, it's been used for purposes other than it was designated for. So I suppose it would have been better for all of us if the applicant had stuck to the original application before they came in with a plan to, in effect, expand the site. And it's the expansion of the site which causes me some concerns. So the double stacking of containers. I've actually got one of these in my ward, not as large as this, I must admit, but the double stacking of double stacked containers are visually very intrusive. Now, if it was normal circumstances, I would suggest we defer this and went on a site visit so we could actually assess the impact on the neighbouring residents of this. But I understand we may not even next time be able to go on a site visit. So at the moment, I feel that the development's not appropriate. In effect, we're being asked to increase the use on the site. There are a number of elements of the plan which we've raised issues about, which the developers said they might go away and fix. But I think the visual impact and the increased use of the site by people actually trying to use containers would be detrimental to the area. So at the moment, I'm not prepared to support this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I've got Councillor Ray that does want to speak now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think I very much agree with what a lot of colleagues have been said. Putting aside reservations over the actual willingness of the, sorry, I've got dogs in the background growling, the willingness of animals and pets. Sorry about it. The willingness of the applicant to actually comply, that's aside from it, and that's obviously for enforcement. I know we have reservations, but I think on a more pure planning matter, I think the intensification of usage is inappropriate for the area. It would be detrimental to the local community, and therefore on that basis I'm currently not in a position where I think I can accept this application on its grounds, and they need to readdress the actual intensity of usage of the site.
Thank you, Councillor Ray, and I think that members have made their position quite clear. I was going to actually suggest that we postpone it and carry out a site visit. But I do take Councillor Campbell's point that it might be some time before we can do that, and who knows what might be happening in the interim. But I think this is an instance where a site visit would have been really, really helpful and informative to us, as it would, of course, on many of the applications that we've considered this year. So we do have a proposal.
If I can interrupt you there.
Yes, please do.
Hopefully we will be back to what is as near normal as makes no difference next time. So I do think that as you say, this is one of those applications that we really ought to have a look at. And given that currently the use is taking place, so we're not exactly depriving somebody of their livelihood, I would agree with you, and perhaps if you propose, I will second, or I'll propose that we defer making a decision on this application until, for at least a cycle, until we have the opportunity to go and have a look at it.
Before I propose that, Colin, I'm just going to ask officers if there is any indication in guidance that you've had access to as to when site visits may be possible.
Chair, if I may, just talking to David Feeney recently about this particular issue. His view was that he couldn't foresee site visits being able to be undertaken until at least the 21st of June due to social distancing rules, particularly in relation to the use of site minibuses, etc.
Yes.
And therefore, it would be probably July at the earliest before we're able to reconvene on appropriate level of site visit for such sites.
Well, that is only just over 2 months. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry. We obviously do have an original motion that was put forward to vote on as well before we get anywhere near the deferral, I'm afraid. So I just thought I'd just remind you of that.
Yeah.
So you do have to go back to that at some point to see whether it's actually seconded and carried, as it were. But yeah, I mean, it could be deferred. I mean, there's been a question about the level of information in terms of sections and photographs throughout the site, and you could defer it for a site visit. But yes, and as I stated before, because it's already operational, it's not really going to spoil too much, except for another couple of 2 months potential nuisance to the residents, if that's actually what's taking place. So it could be deferred. I don't know what position that puts us in regarding the pending enforcement action on the original 2017 application. I think that's something that we'd need to check. I'm not sure about the dates of that, to be honest with you. So yes, it could be deferred, but we do have the motion for refusal first to consider.
Okay, can you put the motion for refusal first then, please? I think that was Barry's, wasn't it?
Yeah. Can I ask for a point of clarification to Nikki as to how it affects my position? Because if I've proposed this and I vote against it, in future, could I have been accused of predetermining? Because in other words, I've made my views clear. I have made my views very clear that it is my view I would like to refuse this. So that if I go forward with that, are we saying I would be better not to take part the next time this one's coming forward? Because I've made my views clear. I have made my views clear.
So in relation to that, Councillor Anderson, you do not benefit from a site visit, and that is the alternative motion that's been mooted. It's not on the table yet. So you could say that critically, you've not had the benefit of that, and therefore you've retained an open mind, and you may alter it at that point in time when you've had the benefit of that. Predetermination is an issue of you closing your mind to anything that could be an alternative. So it's a matter for you, Councillor Anderson. You may wish to recluse yourself, or you may wish to go on a site visit if that is how the debate goes.
Or you may wish to withdraw what you're going to propose in favour of deferring to a site visit.
But the point, I mean, I do still think, provided I've got a seconder, I do still think this should be refused, personally. But I just wanted to check my legal position on that. I think Mr. Butler wants to maybe come in and tell me I'm wrong again.
Mr. Butler.
Actually, Chair, no, I don't. All I was going to confirm, I have been checking in the background, and that actually, if this was to be deferred, if Councillor Anderson doesn't withdraw his motion, and it should be seconded and we voted upon it, I just want members to be aware that actually the deferral motion, which might follow later, would not prejudice us taking any further enforcement action on the original 2017 application.
Okay. That's helpful to know. Okay. So on that basis and your current understanding of your position, Councillor Anderson, do you wish to make your proposal?
I still would like to propose that we refuse this application, yes.
Thank you. Do you need more clarification, Steve, in terms of why we're refusing or it's being proposed to refuse? You're on mute.
Thought I'd hit the button there, sorry. From my mind and from what I've heard, if it should be carried, the refusal will be on two grounds, which is the impact on visual amenity and the potential increase in noise as a result of the intensification of the operation of the site.
Yes.
So I think that's the two reasons that members would be considering as reasons for refusal. And if it should be carried, could I ask for it to be deferred and delegated to officers, or does it need to come back for the exact wording?
It will need to come back, Steve.
Okay, so on that basis, Chair, if somebody wishes to second it, or if Councillor Anderson should wish to withdraw it.
Councillor Finnegan has got his hand up. I don't
Yes, I was just going to ask him to speak. Councillor Finnegan.
Happy to formally second. Let's put it to the vote.
Okay, so we're going for the vote. And I will do that in the usual way. So it's for, against, or abstain. Councillor Anderson.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
Against, but only because I would prefer option 2.
Okay. Councillor Campbell.
Against.
Councillor Finnegan.
For.
Councillor Hesselwood.
For.
Councillor Hamilton.
Against.
Councillor Reagan.
Against.
Councillor Shemilt.
For.
Councillor Ray.
Abstain.
Abstain. And I would be for. So can you summarise that for us, please, Andy? Sorry, I made a mistake. I would be against. Can you correct that, please? I would be against.
Strange.
Oh.
Not that strange when you think of the alternatives.
Almost there, Barry. Almost there.
Sorry, Chair, just totting them up again there.
Thank you.
So
My apologies for misleading you all.
I've got 5 members voted against, 4 members voted for, and there was 1 abstention.
Okay, so that means it's carried. That's
No,
correct.
Chair. No, Chair. Sorry, I took that as that there were 4 members actually voted for the motion for refusal.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including yourself, voted against.
That's correct.
Yes.
Abstention, so the motion's not carried.
Oh, right.
It's not carried.
Not carried. Yeah.
Sorry, it got blended because of the abstention.
Yes.
So that
it did.
So Councillor Anderson's motion has fallen.
Yes.
Now, there was discussion of deferral. I don't think anyone has formally moved and seconded.
I would formally move deferral for a site visit.
Can I second that then, Chair?
Thank you. So we're now taking the vote again on deferring for a site visit. Councillor Anderson.
Well, I'll have to abstain on this. I mean,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Brooks.
4.
Councillor Campbell. Councillor Campbell? Is he still on?
Yeah, he is.
He's missing his... You're muted. Councillor Campbell, you're muted. Still muted. Can you not find your mute button, Councillor Campbell?
Chair, shall we come back to him and
yeah.
Let's see if it's critical?
Councillor Finnegan.
I'm with Barry, I'm abstaining.
Councillor Heselwood.
I'm lost now. For your proposal, sorry, Chair.
Councillor Hamilton.
I'm for your proposal.
Councillor Reagan. Councillor Reagan.
For.
Councillor Shemilt.
Abstaining.
Councillor Ray.
For.
Thank you. Just give Councillor Campbell another go. Can you hear us now, Councillor Campbell? Yes.
Yes, I not only did I lose my mute button, I lost the entire Zoom. Sorry, where are we? 4. Yes.
You are for the proposal to defer for a site visit?
I certainly am.
Yes. Okay. Andy, could you please now calculate the outcome of that?
I'm assuming you're voting for.
Oh, sorry.
You made the motion.
I'm voting for.
Yeah. So that's 7 for and 3 abstentions.
Okay. So that is carried. Okay. Lovely. So that's clear then, Steve. Would you like to sum up for us where we're at and what's going to happen next?
Chair, can I just ask quickly before Steve sum up?
Yeah.
Because we're deferring it and the enforcement order can be action now. So therefore they can do the landscaping and move those containers. Is that what I'm hearing?
Steve?
No, Chair, no, we're deferring the application for a site visit. The enforcement action is still pending, but we will not pursue that until we've had the site visit and there's a decision on the application. That was the point of it, wasn't it? That members wanted to actually see it. Just moving on from that, if that answers Councillor Hamilton's question. So the application has been deferred for the site visit, but also I think members were suggesting further information with regarding the levels on the site, relationship of levels to the adjacent residential properties, and also I think it needs clarity on those through containers, which was something that was raised at Chair's brief, if you recall, because unfortunately the agent was a little bit confused, I think, because at one point there was a suggestion he was going to go through the greenery, which obviously is not on, and then obviously accepted that that there was somehow going to go through from internally from the inside. So I think there are 3 other issues we need to clarify, as well as the deferral for the site visit before it comes back to panel.
And I believe there was a request from Councillor Brooks for more noise, a more accurate noise assessment, or more specific noise assessment as well.
We'll try, Chair, with environmental health. They obviously made a judgment rather than measurements on the site. I think one of the difficulties with this is that it is still a judgment, even if members have wanted to continue to refuse the application. The operation is such that the noise you get tends to be spikes. you know, of the doors opening and clanging, and the occasional potential use of the beepers, which of course we'll also clarify, are the safety beepers as well before we bring it back. So we'll do as best on that, but I'm not sure how they will necessarily be able to measure it, to be fair, but we'll do as best.
Yeah, and perhaps just a more specific explanation such as that you've given, that just gives us more of an insight into the nature of the noise interference would be helpful.
Okay, Chair.
Right, well, thank you very much, members. That was a marathon, and we'll take a 5-minute break now before the final item, if that's okay with everyone. See you back here in 5 minutes.
We've had the 5 minutes, Chair, and it appears that, as far as I can see, all members are back in the meeting. Would you like to restart? You're muted, Chair.
Yes, please, we can start. Thank you.
Caroline, can I just make a announcement? I'm going to have to leave the meeting at 4:30 because I've got an urgent meeting with Councillor Lewis, the leader, and then as soon as that's finished, I'll come back if we're still on. Okay.
I fully understand that. Thank you very much, Councillor Reagan. That's fine. Thank you.
Chair, can I also say that I had a meeting booked in for 5. I wasn't expecting this meeting to be quite as long. So with it being a pre-app, am I okay to be excused at 5 as well, please?
Yes, that is unavoidable, Councillor Ray, and it has gone on a long time. Thank you. Right, can we then proceed straight away to the next item, please? And that is the proposed secondary school, Middleton Complex. Nigel.
Thanks, Chair. Afternoon, members. I will try and be as brief as I can with this overview. This is a pre-application presentation for a new secondary school to provide 1,050 school places located on the site of the former Middleton Highways Depot, which was actually once a former school known as the Middleton High School. So just turning to the first image, the satellite image of the site. This is an image which I've crudely edged the application site in red, predominantly within what is a residential setting. The site itself is situated to the south of the outer ring road, which would then have a shared access, vehicular and pedestrian access, with Middleton Leisure Centre to the northwest of the site. To the southwest is Acre Road, which also provides a vehicular access and pedestrian access point into the proposed development, with housing then beyond. And to the east and southeast of the site lies open land, which is formed by protected green space and functions as playing pitches, as you can see from that image there, and is also crossed with a network of public footpath links. So it would have good connectivity in terms of public access and the availability to be able to walk to the site. So that's the kind of geography, if you like. And just in terms of the context of school planning, I think it's important to note that there is growing pressure for secondary school places in South Leeds, and this has been known for some time. In 2017, the council supported a successful free school bid from Coburn Academy for the creation of a new school to be known as the Coburn Lawrence Calvert School, to be delivered on this particular site. And in September 2018, Executive Board approved the disposal of this site to the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Following that, the building was then decanted in December 2018 in anticipation of this development. And as noted from the covering report, the site has also now been cleared of all the buildings which were previously on the site. The Coburn Lawrence Calvert Free School is being led by the DFE, and it's not due to open until September 2022. And that's at the earliest according to their current programme. As a consequence, there is and will continue to be a significant shortfall of secondary school places in South Leeds. And to date, the shortfall has been met through existing schools, managing additional pupils within their current building accommodation, or by taking bulge cohorts. And this requires a capital investment, though, from the council. However, it is no longer possible to meet this need in this way, and a temporary school is required from September this year. And on that satellite image that you can see there on the right-hand side, the site edged in blue is the location of the temporary school. And this was recently granted planning permission for a temporary period of 2 years, and will be open, as I say, from September, and can offer up to 2 years of full form entry. So 420 places in that temporary accommodation. And then hopefully, if this scheme is granted approval and once it's built out, the pupils will then be decanted into the permanent solution, and the site then cleared and restored to its original use. So the location of this temporary site is vitally important from a demographic point of view. It's crucial to strategic planning in terms of secondary school places in this area of Leeds, and that it's close to the highest population density to ensure that local children are able to be offered a place and to minimise travel as much as possible. These sentiments equally apply to the proposed permanent solution, which would deliver provision central to the area of most pressure. So that, I hope, sets the scene in terms of the need for school places in the area and the level of investment that the council and stakeholders have also made in delivering this provision. And I will now ask Michelle Davies, if I may, who is the planning agent from DPP, to present this emerging scheme with her team. And I also understand there is a representative present from the DFE. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you, Chair and members, for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. We really value any feedback that you'll have for us on this scheme. So Nigel set the overview. As he said, I'm the planning consultant acting for the Elliott Group Limited, and Elliott's are the contractors appointed by the Department for Education to design and build this building, and they're a local company with offices in Morley. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of context, and then Paula White, who is somewhere in the background, who is the architect for the scheme, will go into more detail on the design and the layout and the appearance of the building. And as Nigel said, we do have Andrew Baker on the call, who is the project manager from the Department for Education, and he's here really to answer any specific questions members may have about funding and timescales. So go to slide 1, please, Lewis. Apologies, these do come up quite small, but this is just the site layout plan, and it shows the location of what will be predominantly a 3-storey C-shaped building, which is mainly on the footprint of where the former depot buildings were. And there are 2 accesses into the site, as Nigel said, from the north running down from the ring road. So it goes off the top of this plan that you're looking at. That'll be a shared access with Middleton Leisure Centre, and we have had discussions with Highways in terms of improvements to that road regarding pedestrian access, footway widths and so on. There will also be access into the site from Acre Road to the southwest, and both of those access roads serve parking areas. The top parking area to the north is much smaller and is really for visitors to the school during a day and servicing and deliveries. The southern car park is larger and is predominantly for staff. There is also some opportunity there for parents to drop off and pick up. All of the car parks are compliant in terms of electric vehicle charging points. Slightly off the bottom of the plan, and apologies for that, it shows one of the southern playing pitches, which is already in existence, to be forming part of the scheme, and that pitch is going to be the subject of a user agreement between the council and the trust, so that pupils can use that pitch throughout the day. As a result of that, it will be fenced off and it forms part of the red line application boundary. Slide 2, please, Lewis. Not much to say about this one. This is simply a plan that shows the different treatments to the hard areas around the site. You can see that within the site is, in sort of the darker buff colour, is proposed muggers, multi-use games area. At the present time, we haven't got a landscape scheme developed up, but there will be a soft landscaping scheme submitted as part of the planning application. Next slide, please. again, somewhat small on my screen. I wanted to show this just because of the reference by Nigel to the public right of way. So there is a public right of way. It's one of a number effectively traversing the site from east to west, and that runs between the main body of the site and that southern playing pitch. The intention is that lockable gates will be placed on either side of that public footpath, and pupils would cross that in a controlled manner to get to the playing pitch to the south, but the public footpath wouldn't be stopped up or diverted or impeded in any way. That boundary fencing, obviously safeguarding is also always a key issue with schools. The external fencing around the majority of the site will be a 2.4 metre high green weld mesh fence. Next slide, please. So this is the floor plans for the school, which I'm going to hand over now to Paula, the architect, for her to run through very briefly what the school will be like on the inside, but then also moving on to the more important aspect of the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll just briefly explain the internal layouts to help inform the external appearance, expression, materiality and legibility of the building. As Michelle said, this is a C-shaped building, which is essentially a 3-storey L-shaped teaching element with large volume spaces extending out towards the west, at the north and the south, which comprises of the sports accommodation, sports hall, studios, and the main hall, accommodation and drama studios. I just want to point out that the school has a specialism in performing arts, so this is a key expression of the building, and also informs the positioning of those main halls and drama studios at the front of the building as you arrive from the ring road element, which as Michelle explained is primarily for visitors to use, albeit the main car park area is at the rear of the school. So next slide, please. So this is an aerial view which gives you a better understanding of the development on the site. This is looking from the northwest, sort of overlooking Acre Road and the entrance area from Acre Road. As you can see the car parking to the south, which we're proposing extensive screening so that the development ties in with the green aspects surrounding the site. As you can see, there's centrally the multi-use games area, which is central to the main external play areas, so that it's easy for the school to supervise and manage. And then you can see to the north of the site is the additional smaller car park area, which is for service vehicles and visitor use. You can see from the materials, the expression of the building, that the sports halls and the drama studios are sort of expressed in a more vibrant colour. Again, just pointing out that the school specialism is performing arts, and that we've kept the material palette quite simple, and then we have an expression in the yellow to inform the main circulation areas, which are the staircases and the sort of main visitor entrance at the north of the site, which was on the first slide at the beginning of the presentation. As you can see, you can see quite clearly this Middleton Leisure Centre just to the northwest of the site there. Next slide, please. So this is a perspective view from the ring road, the arrival from the north of the site. As you can see, the main entrance, which is to the right of the image, is expressed with sort of bringing an element of joy to the building, with the colours used, the red and the yellow, and the remainder of the building is brick to the sort of ground level area, which is above brick, tying in with the local context, and the brick used on Middleton Leisure Centre, which is just to the side of the building. And then a higher level, we're proposing a timber cladding
which ties in with the green aspects that surrounds the site. And as you can also see from that image, the main hall is expressed with large glazed elements to provide that transparency through into those key areas, and also in a different material, being the grey. And then you can just see to the left, you could just see the expression of the drama studios. Next slide, please. So again, this is a sort of more eye view from arriving from Acre Road. We're forming a habitat area surrounding the multi-use games area, which will form an element of screening. As Michelle highlighted, we still need to develop the soft landscaping somewhat, but that gives you a sort of bit of a closer view of what the building will look like externally. Next slide, please. And this is just the last slide. So this is just some examples of other schools that have been done on a sort of similar framework and construction methodology. Just point out from a sustainability point of view, this is a modern methods of construction framework. So it's sort of focusing in on the off-site manufacturer, which will reduce transportation and improve the quality of the building, etc. And that's me concluding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that presentation. So as this is a pre-application panel, I'm just going to invite questions and comments together so that we can have a discussion rather than the usual structured approach to an application. And you will see from your papers that we do have 5 main bullet points that we're asked to consider in our deliberations. So I will just throw the panel floor open for this and invite contributions of any kind. I don't believe I can see a hand yet. Councillor Campbell.
Well, just to start it all off, Chair. Looking at the questions, I mean, do we support the principle? Well, I think we've already supported the principle in the past, haven't we? So the layout seems to fit the site, which is a rather strange site in many ways, but I think you managed to get the buildings within that. I think the issue that I have, I think we see it in a lot of new schools, and that's the parking and how you get to the school other than walking. There seem to be a lot of walking routes into this site, but if you live slightly further away, as somebody who's tried to get to the old highways depot at Middleton, it's not the easiest of things to do. So I think you need to address the issue of how pupils get there from slightly further away, who might come on a bus, and that might be a dedicated bus. And if it is, I'm not sure where on the site you would put those, either first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon. And one of the other things we've also noticed on new schools is we always underestimate the amount of staff parking that's needed. And I appreciate there's quite a bit on this drawing, but I get the feeling that a large secondary school will generate considerably more staff than you've got spaces. And that leads to parking leaking out into neighbouring streets. So I think you really need to have a look at that as well. Okay, how's that for a start, Chair?
Thank you very much. That's really helpful, Councillor Campbell. Is there any more comments?
Oh,
I can't see any hands, but so I'd like to have oh, there are some. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, I did my mic instead of my hand, Chair. I would just wanted to ask about the pick-up and drop-off. Is there a dedicated space where, you know, because you said there's parking space and majority of it will be for teachers. How many would there be with regards to drop-off and pick-up? Because parents come early and park up, and, you know, a lot of us have issues with them parking on street and blocking my residents in, can't get out. So how much space is there going to be for drop off and pick up? Just to ask about, maybe this isn't the time to ask, but I'm going to ask it. With regards, once the school is built, will it be the community be able to use it in the evenings? Because we have problems with other schools. And the temporary building, I just wanted to ask, once the temporary building is, after the 2 years, what's going to happen to that piece of land? That's me.
Do you want me to answer those points? You're on mute, Chair.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Dealing with them in reverse order, actually, we haven't been involved with the temporary school that has been delivered by Leeds City Council, but my understanding is there is a planning condition attached to that temporary permission, which requires reinstatement of the land and the playing pitches, which that temporary school is going on. So that will be reinstated. The answer on...
Sorry, Michelle, do you mind if I just interject? I do apologise. It's Andrew Baker from the DFA. I've been involved with a temporary school as well as a permanent school. There is a condition and funding available when the site is completed and the decant happens out of the temporary accommodation. The playing fields will be reinstated, and they are going to be reinstated to full Sport England standard to ensure that the playing facilities on the playing fields to the rear of the proposed site, there's no loss of amenity to the local community. In fact, there'll be an enhancement to local community during the course of the day by the use of one of the pitches by the school.
Thanks. In terms of the second question about community use, yes, there will be community use available for both the sports hall and the main hall in the building, which is a separate hall. So the design has been done such that there is a secure line, but that public community use can be allowed in the building. And typically what happens is there is a community use agreement required by a planning condition. So that is the answer to that. In terms of the parking, I may need Paula to jump in on actual numbers. There were a few points on this. I can confirm that the amount of parking shown meets the City Council's parking standards. The issue of parents parking and dropping off is always a bit of a difficult one, because obviously what we actually want to do here is encourage sustainable forms of travel to the school. And to that end, there will be a travel plan prepared by the school, which will be attached to the planning permission as well. So that will be very much about encouraging staff and pupils to travel by means other than the car. It's obviously a site that can be walked to quite easily. So whilst there is some capacity for dropping off, and by that I don't mean spaces, I mean a turning area, at the same time, it's not something that we want to encourage. And in terms of Councillor Hamilton's point about overspill parking, that's something as well that we're very aware of on school sites. We hit it as a problem a lot. This will be for discussion through the planning process, but typically, again, what happens there is that the council will seek traffic regulation orders, probably on the streets immediately surrounding the school, to prevent parent parking at both ends of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shemilt next, please.
Thank you. You will know better than I, Chair, so forgive me. I'm not trying to, but I was involved when some of the first PFI schools were put up in Leeds, and one of the problems was that because spaces of a premium, the corridors were causing problems because the smaller pupils were getting buffeted about, and particularly since, as we all know, lockers are always an issue, and so kids are carrying books about and backpacks and this, that and the other. Everybody's getting beaten up in the corridors. So it's just a matter of making sure that there is sufficient space that's been taken into account, so that there is the internal traffic of students is quite safe. Is that something that anybody else has come across?
Yes, I think that's a typical and general issue in schools. And with regard to corridor width, there is an issue, isn't there, as well, about accessibility, disability and wheelchair access.
Yeah.
So in general, modern standards do require much broader or wider corridors than have traditionally been built. Would any of our visitors like to comment on that?
I think that might be one for Paula to comment on.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with Zoom, so I didn't know how to put my hand up. But yes, if I may, yes, we do have lockers provided around the school for pupil use, so they don't need to walk around with books, etc. That being one of the latter points. With regards to the circulation widths, they are quite generous in this school, particularly in the areas where we have lockers and where we consider there to be an excessive amount of traffic, such as key arrival points, main entrance, etc. And the communal areas like dining and the library. So we do a thorough circulation review and diagrams to ensure that the circulation and the corridor widths around the school are sufficient for the number of pupils that are in the school. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. I mean, times have moved on since I last looked at it. But I just wanted to raise the point because it occurred to me that, you know, some of the younger pupils were finding it quite difficult.
And I think COVID has taught us a thing or two about corridor widths as well with social spacing.
Good, well done.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Now, my PE teachers would be absolutely gobsmacked that I'm asking this question. But what sports facilities exactly? Aside, I know that you're planning on bringing the playing fields back into use, but and I can see that there's these two pictures here on the site plan. But what other like sports facilities will be available on site? And I'm just checking that there's going to be a good range of different sports available for the kids to do.
Thanks. Yeah, this may be one for Andrew to just give a bit more detail on, but there is a user agreement in draft drawn up for the pupils to use the adjacent leisure centre as well. I don't know whether you can comment on that anymore, Andrew, because you've been a bit that than me.
Yeah, there is a detailed user agreement. It's actually beyond draft stage now. It's actually an agreed position. The DFE are funding the enhancement to the pitch to the south of the site, the grass pitch. We have the two multi-use games areas on site, as well as access to the all-weather pitch on the leisure centre as part of the wider user agreement. Just before there's concerns from the community, the access to the all-weather pitch is going to be by an agreed timetable. So it will be agreed, I believe, a term in advance to make sure that the times are still available for public use. Similar as well as the user agreement does open opportunities to use the facilities in the leisure centre on an agreed timetable basis. So current users won't be impacted by that. Within the actual design of the building, we have a standard forecourt sports hall with associated changing, and that will come with cricket nets internally, badminton posts, basketball posts, and the normal what I call school gym style equipment. Externally, we're working with the trust in terms of with the sports that they wish to provide. externally on the mugger pitches, and we'll be looking at the markings and the associated equipment for that space. So the idea is that it's a broad and comprehensive sporting curriculum provided, and the advantage of the leisure centre gives access to a slightly wider pitch. The consequence of the user agreement is also there's certain elements of reciprocal use as well. So the community, it will be more of a overall facility on the site rather than a particular that's the school, you can't use it approach.
And I'm presuming it's a performing arts specialist school, so I'm presuming there is a dance studio and a theatre.
Yes, there's a within the hall arrangement. I don't know if you noticed this, that we have a drama studio adjacent to the main hall. Within the main hall is a combination of bleacher seating and loose seating, which will and between the drama and the main hall is a demountable wall which forms proscenium arch. So you've got actually a theatre in there as well, and so that provides both for curriculum and extracurricular activities. There is an activity studio which is a sprung floor dance studio. So the performing arts are quite are well covered as well in terms of the design of the building. Music is also a bit of a specialism for the school. They have got we've worked with the trust and the design advisors and Paula and the team at DLA to come up with some very good music and drama provision, including some properly acoustically designed practice rooms. Notice if you get opportunity to look at the plan, none of them have got square walls, they're all angled, so that provides better acoustics in there. They've all got visual panels from one space to the other, so it can be used for observe and practice. So I don't know if you're aware of the trust lead, a gentleman called Dave Gurney, who's actually a performing arts teacher, who's taken quite a lead. He's taken the lead on the development of this project for the Coburn Trust. So we couldn't get away with doing anything but a good set of music and drama areas on this.
Thank you. Does that cover your question, Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, and then some, but then it made me think,
oh,
what
no.
is the visual arts?
Yes, it's a performing arts specialist school, but you'd expect the usual art studios, which I imagine are worked in.
There are art studios. Paula kicked me under the table virtually, but I believe they're on the upper floors and we'll have access to North Light as well. Is that correct?
Just to mute myself there. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
They're located on the first floor. Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of questions from me. Do you think you could bring the slide up again of the external views of the building, the CGIs, please? Okay, so the ones that give the external view there, the one before? Yeah. So that is actually the side of the building, but it is a side that people arrive at if they're coming from a particular location. And my question is about the grey structure on the front, which obscures the symmetry of the windows and the glazed panels at the bottom. What is that?
That is the kitchen. It is located at the front to facilitate access and deliveries, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think a square grey box like that with no windows and whatever that thing on top is, that's presumably going to have plant coming on top of it and being able to be seen through it and over it, is really quite inappropriate on that fascia.
Yeah, there will be an additional screen to prevent the plant area being viewed from within the building. And the screen itself will be more obscure than it's actually shown on the visual. So you won't actually see the plant up there. And the plant that is there is just associated with the kitchen There is an additional plant room located within the building for the main plant equipment. So it is really just to screen the extract units, etc., that are required for the kitchen.
Is there any scope for designing that interior in the internal part of the school, or I just think it is the wrong fixture there?
We could have a look at that. As I said, it's located there really to facilitate delivery access. I mean, as Michelle pointed out at the beginning, the security of the school is quite important. So we want to keep that sort of, not behind the secure line, but we can have a look at that if that is a concern.
Well, for me, I mean, there's a question here about design, and for me that would be a major but. Other than that, I think that the balance and proportions are quite acceptable, but I do think that isn't. So certainly I would appreciate it if some thought could be given to that. And the second area from me is, can you summarise the climate change mitigations that are incorporated into the design?
Andrew, are you in a position to answer this one? It's not my area of expertise.
It's not my area of expertise either, but I'll endeavour to answer your question, Chairman. Overall, we're basically taking a framework level, programme level view of supporting the climate change agenda. So that starts with the fact that this is being procured by the modern methods of procurement and modern methods of construction framework. So we've had a company, we've had Elliott's on board since the beginning of the design process. So we've actually worked with them as part of the design partnership to deliver this project. That will be utilising some off-site construction methods, which means that we have a significantly lower level of wastage. The carbon footprint of the building from a construction purpose will be significantly lower than the more traditional routes for construction. The materials used are of a more sustainable source than some of the more traditional construction approaches. So at a programme level and a project level, the actual construction methodology and the delivery methodology is moving towards net carbon zero. In terms of the actual building specification, it's ultra insulated building. It will utilise an efficient heat source. We are using predominantly electric provision for services, so it's an electric kitchen with induction hobs rather than the more traditional gas kitchen, which gives us a better carbon footprint. There will be discussions with yourselves as an authority in terms of the renewables and that actually on the building itself, in terms of the design, in terms of the use of photovoltaics and things of that nature. However, we do hasten to add that the use of photovoltaics must be looked at in the wider sense as well, because of the carbon footprint of the actual equipment rather than the immediate saving of carbon generation on the building. So we do look at it at a slightly wider viewpoint from rather than just the individual building and the output at that point. But it is for a conversation to be had with yourselves. We are talking about the potential for greywater harvesting on the programme. We are talking about the potential of wind generation on the programme, and we assess each of the sites as we go through it to see whether it's suitable. In this particular instance, it's a tight urban site. A 150-foot wind turbine is not going to be acceptable. So we will be looking more towards other varieties of renewables, and as I said, that's part of the conversation we'll be having as we go in. more deeper into the planning.
Could you remind me if there are solar panels on the roof?
We as part of our ongoing conversation, as I said, photovoltaic solar panels.
Okay.
It is one of the areas from a programme viewpoint that we have to make an assessment and a conversation with local authorities, because we're looking at them in terms of their overall carbon footprint for their delivery. And the output. Ultimately, if we've got a 10-year payback on a set of photovoltaics and it works, then it's fine. If we've got a 25-year payback on a set of photovoltaics for the carbon, then they've only got a 15-year lifespan. It's not net carbon zero.
Okay. I'm just interested to know what obviously you realise that we've got a climate change emergency situation in that, and therefore we do focus on that very stringently throughout all our processes, including planning. What proportion of the budget that you delegate to councils to spend on this, the DFE stream, what proportion of that is for climate change action?
We don't delegate anything to the council.
Oh, right. Okay. How does the funding work then?
The funding is directly by the DFE.
Right. And what proportion of that?
Within the formulaic build-up of the thing is a net carbon zero allocation. And I'll be honest, I don't know off the top of my head what that figure is as part of this at this moment in time. Okay,
thank you. Perhaps you could get that information to us in due course.
I'll endeavour to find out what the percentage of net carbon cost in the budget.
I can't see any more hands. Is everybody satisfied that they have contributed as they wish? Councillor Brooks.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to bring up landscape, because it is, as is referred to in the report, it's very, very uninspiring. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of thought being put into place as to how the children are going to use the spaces. Have you got any further along with that?
If I can just answer that, no, we're still developing the landscape scheme is the answer. So I appreciate that the plans you've seen look quite stark and hard and they don't have any green on that. That is going to be something that's the next step we look at before we submit. So I think Paula mentioned the habitat space. Clearly, we will be looking to soften the edges as well of the development in terms of its adjacency to those playing fields. And then there will be different areas within the site for the pupils, both in terms of sort of hard courtyard areas as well as softer areas.
Okay, so that's still to come.
Yeah, basically.
Right. So members, can I focus you on the points we've been asked to address? And Councillor Campbell did help us with his initial contribution. Do we support the principle of a new school on this site? I think the old-fashioned thumbs up would work very well in this situation. Yep, I think we do. I think there's that's fine, as we have previously. Do members have comments regarding the proposed layout and design? Well, certainly I do have a concern about the grey box construction on the fascia of the school, which is an arrival point.
I support you on that, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other concerns that anybody would want to raise, or indeed the reverse?
I think on that same point, Chair, regarding that grey box, where that veranda type glazed facade is above it, it's obscuring the view from those what are potentially classrooms, I think, isn't it? So that's to be taken into account as well.
Thank you. That's helpful. Any further comments about the design and or the layout, other than obviously the landscaping to the external layout? Okay. Observations on the landscape. Well, I think Councillor Brooks has just made some observations on the landscaping, and we have been told that more landscaping is yet to come, a more considered version of that is yet to come. Would anyone else like to add anything on landscaping? Okay. And the next one is in relation to transport and connectivity. We haven't really discussed that, have we? Do we have any views on that?
I mean, is it on a major bus route? Are there plenty of buses that are going to facilitate this particular venue?
Do you mind if I respond?
Yes, please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah, we've when we went through some early preliminary discussions with Highways and Leeds, we did do quite extensive reviews of the highway system, and we are looking as part of the proposal to enhance the bus laybys and crossings on the area on the ring road adjacent to the Middleton Road entrance. And the Trust are having conversations with the local service providers in terms of the bus provision, both in terms of the temporaries that's coming on site in September and extending that as part of the development for the permanent site. So that the intention is then, and this is because of the geographical nature of the site and narrow entrance on the Middleton Road, is not to actually look to bring buses in on a regular basis, but to enhance the facilities on the ring road and utilise the service buses with agreement to specialise timed services for the pupils. So in reference to the members' comments earlier, the pupils that are coming from a slightly longer distance away, we are considering that in terms of the conversations with bus companies through the Trust.
Does that mean the school or the academy is not likely to have a designated school bus service then?
Very few schools now have a designated school bus. Some academies choose to put their own private bus service on if they have a wide geographical catchment area. As was alluded to, the need for this school is in the particular area it is. And so the current pupil data is indicating that probably between 75 and 80% of the pupils will be within very short walking distance of the school. And we are and albeit it is an academy and it has got a wider catchment than maybe a traditional mainstream school, it does. The figures at the moment in terms of the accepted pupils, because this is now technically an open school, has got a funding agreement in place, is within very, very close up walking to the community. Unfortunately, councils used to fund school buses, and us nasty central government people cut your money, so you stop funding them.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody got any more points on transport that they would like to make?
Can I just come back on that one, Caroline? Because
yes.
I don't know who runs them, but the academy in Ockley at 3 o'clock, there are 8 double-decker buses leaving that site, plus another 3 small minibuses. Now, I'm not expecting, given the catchment area for this school, that you're going to have that sort of traffic. But I think we need to bottom whether if the academy chooses to run a bus service, and some of them do, then I think we probably need to condition that bus will pick up and drop off on the ring road, rather than drive through the adjacent housing and into the site. There isn't anywhere on site to park it.
Totally, Councillor, totally agree with you. And the conversations we've had with the highways officers, to date, very much a case of the public transport aspects of this project are focused on the Middleton Road, ring road. Where we are looking very much at minimising any traffic going down Acre Road other than passenger vehicles into the car park. Hence the chair's comment in regard to the kitchen block at the front. That allows the school to be serviced securely from the Middleton Road side without bringing in 3 or 4 wagons a week and the dust carts down Acre Road. They're coming off the Middleton Road off the ring road. So it is the view of the trust and the view of the DFE and the design team that the servicing of the site is from the Middleton roadside, and the parking, the long-term parking is from Acre roadside, so it's minimising the impact.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some safeguarding concerns with the idea of 11-year-old children being expected to just jump on public transport rather than being a dedicated school bus, at least for the younger ones. Like, they are quite small. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because yeah, I understand what you're saying about it's going to be a more local intake, but as you say, it's also not necessarily going to be a more local intake. What if more pupils come from outside the area, or you might live nearby but not close enough that the child is able to walk there. So yeah, I'm just flagging that as a concern, really.
Thank you for that. I don't know whether you've got any observations on that. I believe it's a practice that happens across the city, but I'll leave others to comment.
I'll note your comment, Councillor, and we'll be feeding back to the trust that put from this meeting. So we'll definitely raise that with the trust and allow them to mull it over and respond if required.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think we've gone through the questions. Steve, have we gathered enough information? Oh, I can see 2 hands have gone up. Councillor Reagan and then Councillor Heselwood.
Yeah, with regards to getting to and from the school, although we're promoting, or you're promoting safe walking patterns and to and from, we know that from every school that we've got this in place, we have parents and carers dropping off and picking up children and young people in their own cars and vehicles. What have we got in place in here to stop congestion and to allow free flow of that traffic?
Can I just come back on that? I think I did mention earlier, Councillor, that
oh, sorry, I wasn't there. I had to go.
Oh yes, sorry, I forgot. Yes, so what I mentioned earlier, Councillor, was that usually what happens in situations like this, in dialogue with the highways officers, is that we look to seek traffic regulation orders for the nearby streets. So in other words, parking and drop off is restricted. Now, I will admit that you stray outside of the realms of planning here, because parents also ignore those said restrictions. I'm afraid that's outside the planning system, really, and is a matter for enforcement. But that's what we would look to do probably on this scheme, as well as all the other stuff which we've talked about to encourage sustainable transport and the buses and so on. And obviously, as Andrew's just said, the existing pupil cohort who are starting in September are for the vast majority very local. So we would hope for a lack of car traffic, but I live next door to a secondary school in Leeds, so I fully understand the point you're making. And all we can do really is liaise with highways to recommend TROs.
So if you could feed that message clearly back, that would be helpful. I can see that Steve and Nigel both want to come in. Could I take Councillor Heselwood's question or contribution first and then bring you both in? Okay, Councillor Heselwood.
Thank you. It's just on Councillor Brooks's point regarding the buses and school buses as opposed to public buses that everybody accesses. We used to have a lot more. Sorry, I should explain. I'm Deputy Exec Member for Schools with Councillor Pryor, for work with Councillor Pryor. We used to have a lot more dedicated school buses across the city, which picked up from each school and made sure that children, were en route home and picked up outside schools. Unfortunately, due to the lack of funding and funding erosion over the last few years, that's it's costing too much. The authority is having to subsidise those so heavily that with the latest round of problems that we're facing now, that we have had to cut those school services, unfortunately, because they're just not funded anymore. So I absolutely share Councillor Brooks's concerns about safeguarding, especially for younger pupils. Ideally, we'd still have those school buses, but unfortunately, that's eroded over the last few years due to lack of funding from central government. So that's why, just to explain, that's now why more and more children are getting on regular buses to get home from schools. But I do share Councillor Brooks's issues around safeguarding for those younger children.
Thank you, Jules. So shall I bring Nigel in first, Steve, and then let you sort of sum up? Yeah, Nigel.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think I said in the introduction that the site is well placed demographically in terms of its greatest area of need, and it's also well supported in terms of footpath links and so forth. So in that sense, sustainably, it's in an excellent location. But inevitably, as with most schools, it will generate lots of traffic as well. So we cannot be blind to that. And I think the issue here is, apart from TROs and improvements to the public transport infrastructure, the bus stops and so on and so forth, inevitably what will happen here is that the leisure centre car park will be used as a parent drop-off. I think that's got to be a given. And the access to the north of the site isn't going to be a dedicated parent drop-off. I don't know if that was kind of stated earlier, but that's just for servicing, and it will be for visitors and not dedicated for parents. So I guess one of the issues here is that it will, in terms of the leisure centre car park, be used as a drop-off, and that's going to be something which is something that needs to be carefully considered.
Thank you, Nigel. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Nigel's actually just covered the point. I was concerned about what discussions had actually been held with the leisure centre operators, because it's quite obvious that car park will be used. And I don't know if it was Andrew Baker or Michelle Davis, but one of them at the beginning of the presentation said that they didn't actually want to encourage anybody coming into that car park, or rather using it as a parking area for dropping off of kids. So where else would you go? And common sense dictates you'd park in the thing to the north, which of course has effectively a very narrow access onto Middleton Ring Road. So it does need some further consideration, does that? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, but that's lovely.
In terms of summing up, I suppose I've got I've picked up all of the comments, I think, from the various ward members that have made about things, which I'm sure will go back to the to Nigel and to other officers. I won't go through them, but the main sort of three substantive points was, the principle, obviously, yes, because there's been the previous discussions about the temporary school. The great box kitchen area, that's not that inviting, is it, when you go into it? Questions about the landscape area, which is supported by Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Reagan. And also Councillor Reagan raised the issue about the screen. So there were some minor, also in the round, some minor issues regarding the design. And then point 3, transport connectivity. Councillor Brooks in particular was concerned about the lack of dedicated transport, which Andrew Baker, I think, was going to look at further with his clients.
Did you get the landscaping points in, Steve? I'm getting a bit tired.
Yes, Chair.
You did. That's fine then. Good. So all in agreement with those points? Fine. That does finally bring us to the end of this afternoon's agenda. And can I thank you for your attendance, your contributions, and your sheer strength of character to stay here so long in the afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll see you all hopefully after the election. Who knows?
Thank you.